outcomes already as a group this year, focusing on letter grades and then focusing on state achievement data. So those are kind of our high stakes, heavy data as far as accountability. But there's a lot of little data that goes into building the great letter grades we experienced this year, a lot of hard work, and that is what this presentation is about, is to show how we formidably monitor student achievement through the year with our schools. So 4 outcomes for my very brief presentation this afternoon. I would like to provide the governing board with just a brief explanation of what we call the USD assessment program. I'll explain a little bit more what that is. Provide you all with a demonstration of our new Google data dashboard, and this is using Google Analytics to visualize data better. Also provide you with student updates, student achievement updates for the 2022 school year. We are right in the middle of mid-year testing, so that just kicked off on Monday. So what I am going to show you is mostly beginning of the year, because we don't finish mid-year until right before winter break. So all of that updated data will go in January. But it'll give you a flavor of what that will, what the schools are experiencing with that data. And then I believe Chris is going to also be providing the governing board with some behavior data to follow my sheet with that. So this is the cover of the what we call the assessment program. This is a document that goes out to all our schools, our teachers. It includes everything from security measures around assessment to their calendars to individual checklists for teachers. But I wanted to just draw a little attention to the vision statement on the bottom. And this kind of speaks to our theory of action when it comes to assessment. Because assessment can be approached in very different ways. And so we are taking a very formative approach to everything we do in the year, meaning that everything we do has an instructional purpose. So, turning data into information that drives instructional insights. Turning data into information is a skill that people have to develop. You'll hear things saying that we're very data rich, but information poor, meaning we have a lot of numbers, but we can't seem to glean information. So I want to demonstrate how we support schools in doing that, because that is probably the most important process in that statement. Because if they're not able to do that piece, it's really hard to get to the instructional insight and know what to do. Because that is really ultimately what we're trying to do, is impact instruction in a positive way and track it through student data. In this, we also have an equity statement, because we don't always think of assessment through the lens of equity. But one of the pieces that we're really trying to do with this plan is create a comprehensive assessment plan. So I've highlighted some key pieces of the statement for you. And really that is really creating this detailed schedule of assessments for every student. And I like that statement of unbroken chain of data for a child from elementary to career, so that every teacher along the way can really make great informed decisions. Another word in here that I think is very important is unbiased data. When we take assessment data and mix it with teacher expertise and teacher observation, we really get a really nice multifaceted view of student achievement for every child and make the best decisions we can. And it really promotes a principle of fairness, because when we are collecting district data, it allows us to look at our system as a whole system. And when we're assessing where there's the greatest need, if there's, we can see that. When there's strengths in the system, we want to find out what's happening there so that we can capitalize on that success and spread it. It makes it easier for us to see the system. And then another document that we're using is called the APE Balanced Framework. And MTSS, as you know, is an important initiative as part of our strategic plan. And so I served on the MTSS committee for 2 years. And one of the first tasks I needed to do for the district as part of that team is take inventory of our assessments, what were we doing at that time. Because assessments will drive a lot of the MTSS. And so we used a document that ADE provides us called this Balanced Framework, and it helps to increase our literacy. And what literacy means when it comes to assessment is being able to know what type of test that you're giving and what the data should be used for and not used for. So this document has been really a core piece, and it's like a foundational pillar of what we've built our entire assessment, formative assessment program. So this is what our district common benchmarks look like by grade level band. And there are other assessment pieces in here that are optional for schools. They have some autonomy to build in some assessments that are specific for their needs. But these are our district-wide assessments. I call them kind of our heavy hitters because these are the ones that we really analyze. We use them for decision making. So in our K2, I have them divided ELA on the top and then math on the bottom. You're all familiar with Acadians. That is part of our Move On reading, and that happens for most kids 3 times a year. And we do also use that for progress monitoring throughout the year for early literacy skills. Our first and second graders also take what we call a comprehension assessment, and that is to see how all those skills that they've developed are equating to comprehension. For our little first graders, it's one of their first experiences of online testing, and this is very strategic to help our third grade teachers. The more we can get our kids ready in first, second grade and get them comfortable with technology, that really alleviates a lot of pressure for the third grade teachers when it's high stakes state testing and the students have to get on those computers. And then on the math side of the house for K2, we do have mid and end of year comprehensives for math. For 3rd through 8th grade, these are entering our grades that are high accountability. So for ELA, our 3rd graders do take the Acadians 3 times because they are still considered primary. You all are familiar with our mimics. We've been using that assessment for quite a while. One of the reasons we have used the mimics is we've really seen high correlation to predicting what is going to happen on a state test for a child. And it's a wide open test, meaning after teachers have administered, they have access to the questions, to the standards. It is a test that they can then flip right into instructional purposes. And that is given 3 times a year, both in ELA and math. And so they're taking Mimic 2 right now. Cool. And then 3rd grade, I put it in there twice, sorry. And then 4th through 5th, 4th, 5th, and 6th, we also use the STAR system, literacy indicator for our intermediate students. And they use the mimics and the STAR to really guide progress in literacy. We want to make sure that those 6th graders are leaving us strong before they hit middle school and are responsible for some heavy content in the upper grades. And then just recently, we have brought science into the scene here with some end of units. They are actually taking those pretty close to each other on their pace and guide. And we've been able to pull some data together for science teachers at the middle school level to start navigating science achievement starting in the 7th grade. So those just came in this year, and we've completed one wave, and I think it's been really valuable data for science teachers. We haven't had anything district-wide for science. Our high schools, when we did high stakes testing together, I explained they're kind of living in the dual worlds, right? They have the ACT as their accountability measure, and then they are also, the teachers are teaching to the standards as they are supposed to be. So we have 2 assessments. There are crosswalks between these, but we do a full ACT practice using a product that's called Horizon through School City. And we actually have already completed a full practice with our high schools. So 9th, 10th, and 11th graders took all parts of the ACT and all the teams, the departments got the data in the fall, and they're leveraging it for different decisions in the classroom of how they can complement that assessment. We don't teach to that assessment, but there are overlaps that they can definitely use. And then our 10th graders will be taking a spring test. So they will actually have a before and an after. The rest of our grade levels take the real thing in the spring, so we use that. And then their standards or their course competencies are measured through common finals. And there has been a lot of work on common finals with teacher committees. And right now, you're looking at all the common finals that are happening in first semester. So huge accomplishment. This was not here a couple of years ago, but we have them in the 4 core areas. And science and social studies will be brand new this fall. The first time they're taking it. So to kind of guide you through achievement, it's a lot of information. So I thought, what's the most concise way to do this? And I picked a simple data protocol that we use with the school called Here's What, So What, Now What. And I've divided, I'm going to demonstrate these pieces using our dashboard, but I just kind of wanted to explain the different parts. So, the here's what is really just about the data. It's about gathering data that you think is reliable, valid, and then organizing in a way people can see it. because spreadsheets are really not a lot of fun. You have to be able to see trends and patterns. You have to be able to put several indicators together to help teachers see what they need to see for instruction. So this year we have built a Google Analytics dashboard, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. The so what is once you've collected those trends and data, we need to be able to interpret them. And what we're really looking for is what we are doing working. And that's always the question that you're trying to answer. A number in isolation is really never, ever valuable. You have to have somewhere to compare it to say, are we going up, are we going down, is it getting better, are we closing gaps? So the so what is really about helping schools make that determination. So we teach them to look at data from test to test, that's always an option. Year to year is an option. Closing gaps between the district and the school. For some schools, that's where they're kind of measuring. We ask them to benchmark against themselves. So they select schools that are like them in demographics. They're watching them to see if they're keeping pace. And we also have schools out there picking reach schools, which is a school that slightly outscores them, and they're trying to figure out how to increase. So they can use all these numbers and benchmarking tools to really measure the impact. And that's when we start to get the information piece that we need to say, is this working? Is it not working? What do we need to do? And then the now what is really about instructional insights. And this is where teachers will say, I know this and I know this, but what do we do now? What do we need to do now? And I'll show you in the dashboard how we've addressed this at a district level, trying to model for teacher teams to do the same process as we do at the district level. So let me take you into the dashboard. I have it open for us, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So this is what the dashboard looks like. This is available to all of our teachers and administrators. You'll see it's kind of a simple menu on this side, and I'll just kind of show you a couple of the features. We really wanted to kind of make this a one-stop shop so that when teachers are working with data, it's not like, oh, I have to go into this website now, and I have to go to this website, because that becomes cumbersome and slows the process down. We do have our strategic plan on the front. That is our anchor, and it's hyperlinked there for their reference. We did have a separate dashboard that was all state data. So if they have to go back and look at their state scores from the previous year, they have that right in the dashboard. We've incorporated important links. So these are the individual, if I'm a 5th grade teacher and I need to know what assessments to give, I have a checklist there that shows me what I'm administering. The curriculum website's on there, so those are just kind of there for them. The dashboard is designed for whatever level you serve in the district, you can access data that you need. So there is a data portion of it that is really at a district level. So when you are writing grants or you're trying to give input on the impact the grant has had on achievement, these are really nice fields to look at. I'll get to the school because that's really what we're here for today, is to come up with school data. But just to look at, I'll just kind of show you what district data would look like. So we gave a math screener to our kindergartners through 2nd graders, and so you would see everyone together. These would be all our K-1-2s. In this particular graph, we have previous data. So the light green is last year, and then the dark green would be this year. This is one way we can see how they're coming in, because this is an initial screener. So if we saw a huge discrepancy between the cohorts, we might indicate immediate need. You can see they're kind of stable. We track data on who's coming in ready and who's coming in not, big stats. So the district part, I'll kind of show you what the mimic will look like. Remember, this is a end of year test, so we'll kind of track through the year how they're doing on mimic A, and then mimic B will go right next to it, mimic C. So as a district, we can see overall in the system, are we impacting these numbers in the way they're supposed to go? So there is a whole section on district data. I want to bring you down to this part. So the mimics have really been kind of a core piece for us in looking at data predicted to the state test. So we do have some ability within the dashboard to, I'll just pick one of our schools, they can filter by their school and see their school, they can see other schools. This again gives them those data points, so if they have like schools where they're reaching for or they're benchmarking against, easy access to comparative data to really make sense of their instructional decision to see if that's how to do the right way. Eventually, they will have all sections of Mimic, and they'll have that. All right, let's go to school. School is at the bottom. And this is primarily where administrators and teachers live. This is the section that they would use to navigate. We have some, again, large pieces of data to help them navigate. This one happens to have all the district averages at the top. And then if you would like to, let's say there were two schools that wanted to compare each other, they could do that. They can filter by test, whatever they wish to look for, they can filter. And this just is convenience of having these numbers right there. So that helps with the data and then the information part of it. But one of the things I mentioned is that curricular piece, like bringing curriculum instruction assessment together. After every data package, we call it packages, are complete. We close the window, gather the data. We offer curricular guidance. So I'm just going to kind of show you what that looks like. So this was an example of fourth grade Mimic ELA part or A. We run our stats as a district, and then our curriculum specialists analyze the data and go through and offer celebrations that they're seeing, areas of focus, and then resources to address the areas that we're seeing. This is a great, easy protocol for teachers also to use in PLC, but most schools will find their patterns look very similar to this. And so we're guiding them to the, now what do you want me to do? What should I do? Because I taught this far. How do I move forward, remediating, and continuing the pacing? So in every data package, they're receiving the curricular piece as well. And those are for every subject that we collect as a district. A lot of information in there, sorry I'm going a little bit fast. The last thing that I wanted to share with you also are, these are student achievement factors that I identify for every school. And I look at these factors as things that really will impact student achievement if they are not really strategically addressed at the school. And so I'll kind of walk you through these four, and then I'll talk, we do some collaborative things in the district to help with these factors. So one of the top factor there is percent of students receiving free and reduced lunch. I talked in the past about that number being negatively correlated across the nation to proficiency. And so as one goes up, one goes down, right? So to combat that, we receive, some of what we do is receive Title I funding. The federal government sets a threshold they call the 75% threshold. And that means when a school reaches a 75% free or reduced lunch rate as a site, that the district must fund them with Title I. In fact, we could decide to only fund them with Title I, but basically they're saying focus has to go there because the poverty rate has risen so high that they're going to need help. So I've identified the 5 schools that are above the 75% threshold in our district. That would be a particular stat I would look at when I'm weighing student achievement factors and I'm looking at need. Another piece that I would look at is percent of students on the campus with an IEP. So the state is averaging about 17% right now in the state of Arizona. PDOC is right there with the state at 17.61. So what I define as significantly higher than that is about 2 times that rate. We have 2 schools that meet that criteria, Larkspur at 40, almost 46, and Sunset Canyon at about 34. So that would be a pretty significant student achievement factor that I would look at, a demographic factor that we would have to strategically plan for at those schools and support. Another factor, EL needs. So district average for EL percent is 7% across our district. I define again significant as 2 times or more the district average, but as you can see, the schools listed are way above 2%. but it shows you the variation. But these are the schools that I've identified that would have that as a significant achievement factor for schools. And the last piece here is kind of twofold. These are when the kindergartners enter our system, they're given the Acadians test to assess early literacy readiness. And there are 4 categories on that test, and the lowest category is called well below. So these students would have been not impacted by our instruction yet. This is like fresh out of right into kindergarten. And so the district average for the well below category is sitting at about a third of our students coming in that category. When I look at our schools, and I'm kind of finding significantly here, about double, but about 60% or more of your kinders coming in at that level. So I identified those 4 schools as having the rates that would be pretty significant, not only on the academic side, but interestingly enough, I know we're going to talk about behavior behavior next. This is a category that could indicate, there is research that tells us reading ability can indicate some behavioral needs as well. So in predicting where we might need some behavioral supports as well, sometimes that early literacy data can give us an indication of where we're going to need some support. So I thought that might be a little bit helpful just in kind of some rationale of where supports district-wide. The schools listed here, we've talked about the North Canton feeder pattern meeting monthly. We've scooped in Shadow Mountain feeder pattern in a lot of the schools. All the schools on this chart are included in that group where we meet and administration comes together to basically problem solve some of these needs that they're seeing across their schools. EL schools, we have what we call EL focus schools. So if you're above 7%, which is the district average, we are meeting quarterly with Rita, our director of EL, and myself, and we talk about goals for EL students, data particular to EL learners, to help those schools navigate that as well. I think that's it for achievement and take questions.
Yeah, so then the question on student achievement portion of this presentation before we want to do it.
I would just like to say, when you go into the assessment, what this means to your people if it makes sense, it makes me want to get the data because now it's being utilized. Thank you so much.
It is a team effort, and lots of people that are more responsible for collaborating with me and making this happen, but thank you.
Yeah, I also want to say is, you keep taking these steps of network this. It's incredible to see it all come together and become a much more useful tool than just looking at numbers. Question on the dashboard. It appears that we're doing sort of a year, we get 1 year of comparative data. Is there the opportunity to get more than 1 year?
So actually, in this particular graph, we do try to go back at least 1 year. It's been tricky with COVID because, going back for the math, I'd love to see 3 years of data side by side. But the data that we've had has been is it really comparable? We've also, in a couple instances, we review our assessments every year. Are these working for us still? Is there a new state requirement we need to align to? So a couple of our assessments are new and have just the 1 year data, but mimics now, I feel like we have the 2 solid years. So the light pink is where we were last year with that standard, and then the darker pink is where we are coming in now. So most of the graphs you'll see at least the 1 year comparison. I think after this year we'll get to that 3 year trend.
And so this is last year's 4th grade to this year's 4th grade. So it's not the same cohort.
It's cohort, yeah, it's cohort specific because teachers are navigating the teaching of standards, and this is mimicking our state assessment. So our state assessment doesn't do the cohorts; they just do this with grade levels.
Thank you. When I'm looking at the student achievement factors,
table. A lot. There's hardly any in there that are just, they're in one category. They're in multiple categories. So there are a lot of factors that are really coming together. I mean, if you look at, well, you know, there's a lot of things going on in that, at that site that make learning difficult. So it's just amazing. I mean, how much they intersect with one another.
And kids in their system are vulnerable to indicators, right? They might have multiple factors. I wish I had more improvement data to bring you, but like I said, we're going to do testing. So after the break, that's when we see. Another interesting thing about the mimic data too is that test allows us to generate growth because they do have artificial scale scores. So teachers get the proficiency level and growth indicator. Because we're such a large district, we can kind of set up a mock situation of the test because we've got 1,800-ish kids in a cohort across the district. So they get a good indicator of where their student in the district is moving as far as growth, are they on the lower end or the higher end? And helps us navigate that.
So, Jean, what's the predictability with our mimics versus the state test? How does this influence predict?
Yeah, so we actually asked the company to provide us a correlation report because I realized that we are putting a tremendous amount of effort, time, and we're depending on these tests to help us navigate what we need to do. So I wanted to make sure that, of course, the company had correlations around state data, but I said we do it around PD data because I want to see. So they took our AASA scores and they took our mimic scores from mimic C, which would be our final, and they correlated every grade level, every subject. So correlation numbers, a 0.7 is considered fairly strong statistically. Every single test, every single grade level was a 0.8 or above. So very strong. And I kind of go in and just kind of spot check kids to see if they're, highly proficient. What did Mimic C say? Now we do have a little gap of time between Mimic C. We planned it that way so teachers have a little bit of time to maybe act on that data. And if there's kids that just need a couple of things to get ready for state testing, they're ready. So what we hope to see is even a little increase from Mimic C to the state test so kids do better. In many cases, we do see that. We have that little 3 to 4 week window where teachers can act and draw certain items to their attention and say, okay guys, when we answer this question, this is how you read it. This is what this vocabulary means. And it really does help students perform better.
How are the schools using this data? Are the principals accessing this data? Like who and how often are accessing and using the data?
Yeah, so our data primarily follows a beginning, mid, and end schedule. Now, end is a little different because our state test is truly not at the end of the year. So Mimic's end is really before spring break, and then we get the data till after. Acadian's is beginning of the year, but it kind of follows that 3 times a year. After every data package comes out, I do have a virtual meeting with all instructional coaches and principals. We used to do just principals, and what was happening is principals had to go back and relay everything to their coaches. So we said, let's get you side by side. So they sit together and we do a virtual data chat with everyone, teaching them how to look at their stats. Sometimes there's things in School City they need to run, so they get a little extra help in being able to go back and lead their teams. The dashboard, so for that part of it and for school leadership, I think they're using like the bigger numbers, like 3rd grade. How's our 3rd grade comparing to other schools? I've identified 2 schools that I'm making sure that I match with, I keep up with. Are we keeping up? We've had really cool things happen, like we'll have like a 20% increase in one school, and principals are calling that. What did you do? Is it a structure? Did you do a lot more time? What resources? So that was our hope, is that we would see successes and really what got you there. Teachers have access to the dashboard. The administrators get that access. We've asked them to bookmark it. What's really important to teachers, I think the most critical part, is if they're on the leadership team and they're helping with their navigating of stats, definitely the statistics. But what's really valuable is that curricular piece. is like, what has happened, but tell me what to do. Because if there is a sub-skill, like let's say we're in a fifth grade classroom and there's a third grade sub-skill that's needed for a standard, to ask fifth grade teachers to go and look for that and find it and bring it in and do small groups, we're trying to head that off as much as possible and give them, so the curriculum specialists, they spend almost a week analyzing all the minutes in their subject area and then really guiding teachers to, here's how you can help the kids on the standard. Because we're trying to put as much at teachers' fingertips as possible. Data is super important, but we also know their primary focus is instruction. So we've got to get this to them in a concise way so they can act. Did I answer that?
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Laney, do you have a question?
I'm good, thank you. No, the questions that I had were all asked, so yeah, I agree with a lot of the views that were already expressed, so thank you.
At this time, I'll invite Dr. Officer to come up and share with us a few slides, also about student achievement, particularly behavior. So, welcome, Chris.
Thank you, President Ventura, board members, Dr. Bales, cabinet, thank you very much. So in our first attempt to look at discipline data for the purpose of this board study, we first took a look at the number of incidents or the number of office discipline referrals, and this is for our elementary schools. This elementary school data compares the number of incidents or office discipline referrals recorded in Infinite Campus, and I might periodically slip and say IC if I do that in this presentation. So during the 2018-2019 school year compared to this current year, and we chose 2018-19 because that was the last year that we had sort of a normal school year to compare data against. The bar lines in blue represent those reported incidents in 2018-2019, and the red bars represent our current year data. And as a reminder, we're nearing the end of the first semester, and so really only nearing the first half of this year's data. We would expect that this data is going to slowly increase as the year progresses. When looking at this data, however, you will notice that there are some significant outliers. You can see, for example, that Palomino Primary recorded over 640 incidents in 2018 and 2019. And this high number compared to other schools may be that Palomino Primary was really focused in on recording every single incident and every time that a student was sent to the office. Whereas you'll notice that other schools have very limited number of incidents recorded in Infinite Campus. And this indicates that we really don't have universal practices of schools entering data into Infinite Campus. It makes it very difficult for us to use this data then to compare school to school. If, however, the schools are using the same approach or the same process recording with regard to entering data as they did in 2018-19 to this year, we may be able to look at that data for a single school to compare those two data points, 2018-19 to this year. But we really would need to drill down into the data to look at each infraction to determine how data is being entered. And again, it's really hard to read into this type of data. Unfortunately, the data inside of Infinite Campus is not clean. We knew that earlier in this year. We started a process of getting our schools to use the system with consistency, but we just have not reached a point of fidelity yet. And we continue to work with our sites to clean up discipline data. I have the same type of elementary or incident data recorded then for middle schools. And again, you can see an outlier in Sunrise Middle School. When examining their data, it appears that they focused and were committed to documenting, again, all incidents of when a student was sent to the office. Again, the data is similar to the elementary incident data. Is difficult for us to use to compare school to school because processes are different at each of our sites. But again, if the site was looking at, if their practice was the same in 2018 as it is today, we would be able to compare from the school from year to year. High schools, you can see again, I think Shadow Mountain really emphasizes a true outlier, having, let me get the data here for you, 4,590 incidents that were reported in 2018. However, when we think about these incidents, that school is a great example of focusing in on on a particular infraction. Out of these 4,590 incidents, 3,795 were for student ID infractions. Pinnacle, it also looks like they see quite a few infractions, but in their data, I noticed that 1,790 of their infractions were also related to student IDs. And North Canyon didn't record anything with regard to student IDs. So we can see again that this data just isn't really clean enough for us to be able to make a data-informed decision. I will share with you that I dug a little deeper into Shadow Mountain's current year data, and they are continuing to record students with student ID infractions. So again, I would go back to saying that if the school's practice is the same from 2018-19 as it is this year, we could then be able to look at those two data points. Digging a little bit deeper into Shadow Mountain, because they still continue to look at student ID infractions, we can see that they're making some significant progress over the years. So if not student incident data, if that's not clean enough for us to make those data-informed decisions, we then turn to look at suspension data. There is more consistency between our schools when entering behaviors that resulted in an out-of-school suspension. For major infractions such as drugs, alcohol, tobacco, fighting, typically our schools will have the same disposition for those types of infractions. And as a point of clarification, when we look at this data, this is not the number of students who were suspended, but the number of suspensions that were issued. So a student very well could have been suspended multiple times, adding to this data. This data does suggest that as students enter middle school and through their first 2 years of high school, we do see an increase in exclusionary discipline or suspensions in response to behavior infractions. And additionally, I'd like to point out that in response to the new law that restricts the number of, suspensions at the primary grade, we would expect to see these numbers be a little bit lower. We then further disaggregated the data to look at some major categories. So looking at drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, fighting, assaults, threats, weapons, so kind of looking at that in terms of aggression toward others, defiance, disrespect, and so looking at those types of behaviors as a group, and then bullying, harassment, and intimidation. Out of the 792 out-of-school suspensions that have been imposed this year, 287 or 36.2% have been in response to drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. I did this morning dig into the 2018-2019 data and found that in that year, 2018-2019, only 25% of our students were suspended for drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. So we see that there's now an increase up to 36%. Going back to this year's data, 243 or 30.8% were related to fighting, assault, threats, physical aggression, or weapons. And this number is down from 38%. So going from 38% down to 30% this year. 38% in 2018-2019. Now again, we cannot read that much into this data. However, it should be noted that social emotional learning focuses on social skills and building relationships between peers. So there may be that correlation there. Going back to this year's data, this data here, 154 of the infractions, or 19% were related to defiance, disorderly conduct, profanity, and theft. And this number too is down from 24% in 2018-2019. In our current year data, 74 incidents, or 9.3%, were related to bullying, harassment, and intimidation. And this number is actually up from the 2018-2019 school year. Back then, it was 6%, 6.8%. The other category is made up of violations such as cheating, leaving campus without permission, or vandalism. This data does suggest that we need to focus our efforts on substance abuse, and bullying and harassment concerns. And our emerging PBIS frameworks offer us the opportunity to do that. This data does allow us to compare schools to one another with a little bit more confidence. Echo Mountain Intermediate, this graph is, there's so many elementary schools, so to help with that. Echo Mountain Intermediate has experienced the most suspensions this year, followed by Cactus View Elementary, Palomino Intermediate, and then Marksburg. And again, this is not the total number of students who have been suspended, but the total number of suspensions. Middle school, you can see Vista Verde having the most, followed by Greenway Mountain Trail. And then finally with our high schools, you can see this data that North Canyon followed by Pinnacle. Now, we didn't drill deep into what each one of those infractions were. That would be our next step. But I can say that while this data is incomplete and shows some inconsistencies across our district, it does provide us with some indication of what the student need areas are and then the communities that we would want to focus. And that's the data that we have to present to you today. And available for questions.
Chris, Dr. Oscarson, where is vaping coding? Is that typically the alcohol, drug, tobacco, or is it separate and not mentioned in this data?
Tobacco. It's actually listed in Infinite Campus as a tobacco violation. And then we have to, when those infractions do take place, administrators need to take it to the next level because vape pens could also be a wax pen, which is the THC derivative. So then that would be coded under drug use or drug possession.
So, it seems like, as you said, there's not necessarily fidelity to reporting. Who's responsibility to report? Is this more of a training?
It is a training effort. So with our assistant principals, our deans, our TOAs, that was one of our areas of focus when we met with them this first quarter. We have another meeting scheduled for that. So in addition to the coding and the entering, it's also conversations about how would we go about that investigation and then what type of disposition can we use to not just impose discipline, but also to provide services for that student to not have a repeat of that offense. And I also want to share maybe a little bit of a teaser for a presentation to come with John Bowen. Infinite Campus is not the only place that we're holding discipline data. So schools that are implementing PBIS and have really made it to a level of 70% of fidelity with those tier 1 interventions are housing a lot of their data, the vast majority of their data in SWIS, school-wide information systems. So this is allowing the school not only to take a look at major infractions or an office discipline referral, but allows them to take a look at minor behaviors that would have been, the classroom teacher would have intervened and redirected. The classroom teacher would have retaught the behavior expectation. And by gathering and really taking a look at those minor data, those minor behaviors, it helps the school shape their PBIS program. It helps them shape their rewards. It helps them shape the different type of boosters that they might be doing to address specific behaviors.
As we're doing more PBIS and more strategic plans, will more of the schools be using Swiss more the fidelity?
I don't know if the answer would be like they're going to be using Swiss. Swiss is an available option to them,
Okay.
but it's a separate program. And so right now, a school that's utilizing Swiss, and what we did find is that those schools that are using Swiss are also inputting data into Infinite Campus, but it's a double entry for them. So if they're entering a major in Swiss, which they're using with their their school-based community PBIS committees, then they're also entering the data again into IC.
And we spent last spring, working with our IT department to align the build within Infinite Campus, the platform that's a little bit more similar to Swiss. Because Swiss, even if everyone's using with fidelity, we don't have an opportunity at the district level to look at that at an aggregate view. So Getting them to migrate into Infinite Campus is going to allow us to provide that look.
In addition, the state, when they're looking at certain categories to pull information, whether it's weapons or violence, will only be pulling from Infinite Campus, not Swiss. So that's why we have to work on changing some of our behaviors to get the information put into Infinite Campus as well.
It really sounds like we need to tighten this up in terms of where the data lives and how we're using it, and having everyone report the same information so that we can give them the services and what they need. Not just guessing, you know.
Okay.
Thank you. This week in Student Voice, the students talked about suspension. And these kids go home, they probably have parents home, what are they doing, what are they learning from it? And they say it'd be a lot better to have in class. I mean, it's school after school, not in the class, but, and except maybe for those heavy duty infractions they brought up. And it was really interesting having these ideas come from the students that it'd be more effective. And I thought it was really interesting. And they said, if you want suspension, to people not to want to be suspended, you know, to avoid being suspended, and make them miserable, that would be code abuse. And you could also show movies on drugs and everything else. So I thought she had some great ideas.
No.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Did Mr. Laney have any questions? I'm sorry.
No, I was pushing the button and saying no, but I wasn't on the screen, so.
Okay. We can do a break. We're gonna do a quick break. 3-minute break.
I didn't know that was our time.
Right?
Sure, again, board members, at this point in the study session, we'd like to just call out some of the data that you've been given and have reviewed in preparation for today's conversation. And that included some employee survey data regarding our employees, some survey results from.
Thank you.
So we had survey results from an employee survey since the last governing board meeting. We have given you some administrative survey results since the last governing board meeting. We provided you a parent survey results from the last governing board meeting. We provided you details about the class size impacts that were discussed from the last meeting. We provided you data regarding the budget task force original considerations of 70+ topics that they started with and talked about throughout their process. And we provided you information about instructional coaches and social emotional learning specialists, their assignments and their locations, how much of their assignment is at any particular school, as well as the funding source. So we gave all that information to you. I apologize that you had a lot of homework, but I hope that you found it helpful. It was what I remember you asking for at the last meeting, so I hope that was valuable to you. At this time, we'd like to run through kind of a revised presentation that, for the most part, was given 2 weeks ago, the last meeting. Shared with you some revisions. You'll see strike-throughs and highlights. So we just built off of the presentation from last time. And then we have some new slides and new information, because at your request, the budget task force reconvened this past Monday, met, talked, and they have additional recommendations for you to discuss and consider. So just real quickly, nothing changed. Our history is the same. We've talked about that multiple times at multiple presentations since June. And so I'm not going to read any of that to you. That's really not new on the background and history. One of the things that we did add was a parent representation to the group at your request from the last governing board meeting. So this past Monday, we did have parent representation. This was the original presentation from the budget task force. This was their last meeting of September 30th. And this was what they had recommended at that time. You recall that information, we discussed at length. And that recommendation still left us with about $950,000 to go in terms of meeting the two goals, finding some solutions to the budget shortfall and providing raises to our employees mid-year here. I'd like to take the opportunity to talk about, because when we arrive at making decisions in terms of budgeting, it's important to know that there are a lot of factors taken into consideration. And so I'd like to call on Jill to just remind us of some of those factors, because we've had some direction to help us build budgets. This is $300-some million budget. We're landing an aircraft on here on the landing the aircraft on the carrier in the middle of the ocean. And when we look at that, we have to try to project the end outcome. Where's that going to finish? So one of those finishing places is the budget balance carry forward. And so Jill, talk to us a little bit about the philosophy around budget balance carry forward.
So in terms of philosophy for budget balance carry forward, there have been ranges in different years, and we talk about M&O budget balance carry forward. That's our main fund and what we like to target for that. Moving from fiscal year 22 into fiscal year 23, because we knew that we would need to do some of that budget balance carry forward to address the issue in fiscal year 22. We were hoping to land between 7 and 8%, and they landed at just above 7%. So right within that range that we were looking for, based off of direction. Then we have some of our other funds that we take into consideration that are similar in use to M&O funding in terms of their use for day-to-day operations. So it's not like a capital account or restricted grant account or something of that nature. So this is classroom site funds, indirect costs, and a couple of others. And then we like to keep it about the 11% range, and we did so for the end of the fiscal year. 22. There have been years where it's been higher than that, a little bit above 15%. Years where it's been a little bit lower than that, at about 10%. But we did intentionally know we were using some of that budget balance carry forward to resolve the shortfall for fiscal year 22. We went in the range that we thought we
So finishing fiscal 23 is still the goal to keep that between that 7 and 8% of our budget balance carry forward.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, we also have, as many of you know, the Arizona public funding is very complicated. And there's a lot of silos of information. It makes it very difficult to explain to the typical layperson. But one of those other funds that we typically look at, receive from the state, is district additional assistance. And we've had some direction that helps us in planning how we use DAA. Talk to us a little bit about the factors and considerations that we use in that fund.
Yeah, so some of my predecessors have kept a great detailed history of our use of DAA, and we have about 20 years worth, which we shared with you guys before. Most recently, though, the last, I think it's been 4 years, we're keeping around 84 to 85%. They're typically 84.75% the last 2 years. Of our district additional assistance funds are going to M&A. So that will help support, salaries and benefits, which is the goal for 85% of our annual budget. And then that remaining 15 to 20% goes into unrestricted capital.
So the state uses DAA for what purpose, Joe?
Well, it used to be for a specified purpose, and it was called only unrestricted capital at that time. It was specifically for capital needs. And about 10 years ago, they said, we understand that this respective one needs across the state with an overall flexibility within that. And it can now be used for, it's perfectly fine to put some of that into MML and then it's okay to put some of that into unrestricted capital. Most districts still put the bulk of it into unrestricted capital, so we're really using that fund, but in the past years, the priority for the other strategy use that district additional assistance to support the
In our history, have we ever used 100% of it for MML? Thank you. This next slide, also from the last presentation, is the details from the Budget Task Force, their recommendations. This is not new information, this is the same as 2 weeks ago. And of course, I mentioned that we still, with this recommendation, are about a deficit of $950,000. In addition to those recommendations that you see on the screen that were presented 2 weeks ago, there was a compensation package that went along with reductions. So that's the second part of this conversation. What can we do to provide additional compensation to employees? We have hundreds of vacancies, and we want to be able to attract, retain, and be competitive. So we have want to quickly review the compensation recommendations that we presented 2 weeks ago. And as directed, these are differentiated amounts between groups. And so the support staff employees, the Paradise Valley Support Education Association, that will result in a new salary schedule resulting in an average of 6% within a minimum of 3%. So 6% was going to go to the group. Everybody in that group would get 3%. Some would get more than that, and they were involved in that conversation. And you can see the bullet points there on how they would distribute some of that money. The Paradise Valley Education Association would receive 3% to the group, 2% on the base, $835 to each level of priority service credit. And so they recommended that. There's no change in that. The next group is the executive support staff. We refer to them as executive assistants. And there's been a question about who is this? That's 6 people. And they typically fall in the same category as our Paradise Valley Education support employees. Many of them are hourly employees, they're support employees. These folks are 6 of them. They directly report to the assistant superintendent to superintendent. They have executive level functions, but they don't supervise people. So under FSLA, they are not exempt. So, correct, Dr. Holmes?
That's correct.
I'm on the right track so far. So, they have always been treated like the same as that we apply dollar amount or percentage amount to the PBSE. That's been our past practice. The administrative group, this is as directed to provide 2% to the base. But I wanted to ask a few questions here that have been asked of me. So these differentiated amounts between groups, this is only the second time in about the last 10 years that we've had differentiated amounts per group. We know that it takes a hit on morale, but I know that our administrators, our teachers, our support staff working together, we're all in consensus that we wanted to do more for our support employees. That's where we have the greatest number of vacancies. And so everybody was on board with that. There's been no revised recommendation or recommended changes to these differentiated amounts. Another question that has always come up is, are we administrative heavy? So it's a great question, and it's one that should be asked. It's certainly one that we ask every year as administrators. We have an approved org chart that we bring to the board and we look at that. We have 104 administrators. That's anybody that supervises and evaluates who has a title of supervisor, coordinator, assistant director, assistant superintendent, or superintendent. Did I miss any? Principals, there you go. Principals and central office administrators. My apologies, friends. Assistant principals. All of those that have those titles make up the 104 people in our district as administrators, as a true definition of administration. They're on an administrative contract, they have administrative benefits, they supervise and evaluate. That group of 104 represents just about 3% of our workforce. 3% of our workforce. Now, the state uses a different definition of administration. And we do many times too, because a larger definition of administration includes employees from every group. We have teachers on assignment, we have executive support staff, we have duty aides and crossing guards, but they're not necessarily administration side, but secretaries would be. Record secretaries would be, right? Librarians fall into that. They're non-instructional. So they sometimes fall into this larger definition of administration. When we look at the annual financial report, Jill, help me if I'm tripping up a little bit here. That is a number that compares us to other districts, including charters. Our number is around what percent, Jill?
So in fiscal year 21, which was the last time we had a classroom spending report up until 22, we were at about 8.9%. For fiscal year 22, the classroom spending report hasn't come out yet. It won't come out until March 1st. But they use our data from the AFR, and sometimes the Office of the Auditor General makes minor tweaks to that. But I expect our percentage to be about 1% less than it was for fiscal year 21. Pretty significantly less. So that's up, the full pie. So that drop is about 13% drop within the administration category. Pretty significant.
How do we compare in terms of our administrative costs to other peer-like districts of same size and demographics and around this?
So we've always been in the last few years, been a couple of tenths of a percent lower than those we generally compare to. I don't have their data yet for fiscal year 22. I just have ours. It's possible that other school districts have decreased by 1% in administration. I don't think it's likely. So I think once we get our fiscal year 22 classroom spending report, it's probably going to look pretty good in comparison.
And in our annual financial report that's on the website, there's a popular paper that we put out there. We always share the dollar amount for administrative costs per pupil. And the state average runs around $1,000 or so per kid, and we're around $800 and some dollars per student, per pupil allocation. So back to the question, are we top heavy? I don't think so, but it always is important to us to look at that and ask ourselves, can we do more with less? Just like we do with other employee groups. It is not easy. All of us are in the same boat in terms of having to put more on our plate many times. I can tell you that over the last 30 years, in this state alone, the Arizona Revised Statute, Title 15, has doubled the amount of statutes that govern our district and the requirements for compliance has doubled over the last 30 years. It's unbelievable. That doesn't mean there's a justification for more administration. The jobs are different now. The jobs for teachers are different now. The job is harder. The job for a principal is different than it was when I was in the building. It's harder. And it's that way across the board for all of our employees. Things have changed. The state and certainly federal requirements are very different nowadays than they were 30 years ago. And so I would continue to advocate for, one, in this conversation tonight, and in future recommendations, that there continue to be a differentiated compensation amount between the groups. And I certainly believe that, as previously directed, that a small amount should go to everybody. The economy hits everybody, and even though there are different compensations involved, we want to remain competitive in attracting and retaining employees at all levels. Now, with that being said, I will donate, in my contract, I would receive the same 2% as employees. And I'll donate my 2% that's paid out in January or May, if that's what we do, to the Paradise Valley Education Foundation. As my good faith effort to say, I'm doing my part, but I will continue to advocate for the administrative team to get their little bit in this conversation. In terms of, what we've already done last time, we spoke about what we've already paid out this year. We continue to honor to our employee groups. Those amounts were paid out in base and one-time incentive in September, and an additional incentive of 3.34 to all employees in November. We still believe that we can meet the timeline for distributing dollars in these compensation recommendations if we have action before the end of the semester. So that was a change, I believe, in that date. About a month.
It said December, it will be January.
So we think we can still accomplish that by the end of January, but it'll be a little bit of a lift. And then last time we also talked about some recommendations from the original budget task force with some cabinet considerations for that conversation. That was still there. That's a refresh of what that conversation was about. In terms of next steps, we can certainly meet that timeline. If we hear from the board today an interest in a recommendation to take action, we would call for a special meeting a week from today and bring you a recommendation based on what we hear from you and such, so that we can still meet those timelines. But another question that I'm often asked is, well, what did administration do this year? What did you do this year? When you knew that there was a shortage, what did you do this year? And there are a number of things that we have done that we just, quite frankly, haven't advertised. All right, we haven't. And these are some positions that we put on hold. We implemented what we call a strategic hiring review. And positions went through cabinet and were reviewed before they were approved to be posted. We approved groups of positions, so we knew that classroom positions, teaching positions, instructional aid positions, we were going to post those and try to fill them. We had so many vacancies in there, right? It didn't make sense to not. But where there were other positions that we could put on hold and create some budget capacity for one-time money this year, or to help us in our efforts to balance, the shortfall and provide raises. These are some of the positions that we pulled. Now, not all of them are as M&O funded, but they were under our review and making some decisions. When you look down the list, we didn't need as many trainers because we don't have as many bus drivers coming in the ranks, unfortunately. So we didn't need two trainers?
I think we've had it.
We've had up to 4, I think, at one time, and we felt like we didn't need to fill that position. We can use that money elsewhere this year. These are things that we put on hold for the year. They haven't been made as a final decision, as an ongoing, reduction, but they were certainly things we did this year. The 3.5 administrative interns. Well, that's an administrative support position, falls under the definition of administration, but those are typically teachers on contract, TOAs, we refer to them as, right? So their support, their leadership, their administration, but technically they're out of the certified bargaining group. But they in turn have been called APs at many of the sites. 3.5 FTE were not filled this year. And we also then moved an assistant principal from PB Connect, even though it was ESSER funded and knew it would be eliminated in a year, we moved that to fill another vacancy as a TOA to provide support. So those are some of the things that we did this year in terms of $659,000 that we took action on to create some budget capacity in the current year. This is just the beginning. As I said this 2 weeks ago, we have a cloudy financial picture. We're going to continue to have challenges in the spring. And then we get to some of the things that I'm going to ask Dr. Holmes and Ms. Berrigan to share. At your suggestion, our budget task force reconvened on Monday this week, and we talked about a lot of things. There were some things they couldn't quite agree on, but there were some things they did. So, Dr. Holmes, Ms. Berrigan.
Sure, so we were able to come to consensus on a revised recommendation, and we'll talk about the details of that in a moment, but we want to share with you some of the things that we talked about that we did not come to consensus on this week. We have a little bit of understanding of the conversation. So we did talk about instructional coaches. In the course of that conversation, we were never able to get to a place of formulating like how many or where that might look like. So that is an example of one of the things that we talked about that did not make the final revised recommendation. We talked about additional department reductions to the tune of 10 FTE. We also contemplated maybe something less around 5 FTE. So these would all be positions at various departments, so not at the school level, at the department level. In that discussion, one of the things I'll share with you is that PDSEA President Michelle Corwright in particular had some serious concerns about this particular item. And one of the things that she shared was that she's had many a conversation with folks in some of these departments about the workload just being too much as it is, and that reductions in this area would be overwhelming to the people like standing, if you will, around doing the work in some of these departments. We had some discussion about additional furlough days for COA and cabinet. We also talked about leaving class size intact, and I believe this was, at least for me personally, I think this is channeling some of your comments at the last meeting, Ms. Bacon, Board Member Bacon. We have at each of our elementaries a total of a 1.5 allocation, 0.5 TOA, 0.5 SEL, 0.5 IC, instructional coach. Is there, could we maybe reduce that 1.5 FTE allocation to a 1.0 allocation and give the sites some autonomy to decide what that would be? So that was discussed in a couple of points. We did not come to consensus to do that. Last but not least, not really an item about reductions, but more of a statement to say that there was some concern that if we didn't follow through with what we had previously shared in terms of the original recommendation for pay increases, which fails, just recap, that would not be met well with our staff. That would be a challenge for our staff.
Yeah. So this is in really table format, and then also with dollars added to it, a summary of what changes based off of the things that Budget Task Force was able to come to consensus on this past Monday. So you'll see anything that's just in white there is what it was previously, but there's the removal of what is listed as item number 4 that was on there previously from the Budget Task Force, increasing average gen ed class size by 1. And that would have affected 29 FTE, and that would have been K-12. So rather than that, we have items 5 and 6, which is the reduction of SEL positions at secondary, that's 12 FTE. And then the increase in average gen ed class size by 1 at just elementary, which is also 12 FTE. Both of those items each come to $816,000. So the new total for reductions there is a little bit less than the $4,028,000 that we had on September 30th. It comes to $3,688,000. So rather than beginning the bargaining season with a negative $950,000, beginning the bargaining season with almost $1.3 million. I don't know if Dr. Bill, do you want to add anything to the end of that one? Oops, sorry, you went backwards.
There we go, gotcha.
I'll stop clicking. So the ongoing deficit, as we've shown from before, is just under $5 million. The amount from the prior slide, $3,688,000. leaving the balance for fiscal year 23-24 at $1,290,000. That's the ongoing balance of that moving forward.
So just a couple of questions that have been asked there to ask and will help me. In these reductions mentioned on this previous slide, what does the reduction mean in terms of a percent to the group, like to our certified group? These reductions, what percent reductions that to?
So to our actually for both certified and the ESP group, they're about at 1%. For certified, it was just under 1% at a point. It's on the paper, but about 0.89. Thank you. And then for ESP, it was I think 1.08%. So a reduction of about 1% for each.
And I just want you to know that I am committed to, reducing administrative costs in a similar fashion to the administrative group, that larger number that we talked about, for any board-approved recommendations that impact the other groups as well. So some of those decisions, have yet to be made. We have statutory timelines for making some of those decisions, but I'm committed to making the same reductions by group as we see in the others. Times have changed. It's very, very difficult. And I wanted to also mention that, as you can see, we're still not there. We started this summer with this, with a commitment that we can solve it over more than 1 year. And we've demonstrated that. We used one-time money at the end of fiscal 22. We're doing some ongoing revenues this year in fiscal 23. And these considerations and reductions for 23-24 make it certainly a multiple-year conversation in resolving the issues, and yet still providing additional compensation. So while we may start, with a cloudy picture in the spring, and this an additional $1.29 million is added to that picture, it makes it a little more challenging. It's not unusual, right? We can get through this because we work with our employees in making some of the decisions. So if we head into the spring bargaining session, I know that we can work together to resolve this moving forward. It's one of those things that's not going to be easy. That we won't. We never said it would be, but we can get there together. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions.
I'm just going to tag on to the last thing you just talked about, so I'm ask it while it's fresh. So going into bargaining, in addition to whatever we think is going to be the decrease in enrollment and decrease in funding to the state, whatever those dollar amounts may be, additionally, there's definitely a hard $1,290,000 that needs to be, will all be part of it. And the people who are part of the budget task force are also part of the bargaining. And it's a there's some overlap, so there's an understanding, and that was okay. They understand that that's where this next step will be, is that it will come through there. Just wanted to confirm that was that. It's not a surprise. It won't be a surprise to anyone going into bargaining that, wait a minute, we're starting with that. If that's fully understood. Okay.
If you recall, earlier in the conversation, Ms. Beverly also talked about, budget balance carry forward and payouts. And a year ago in January, we had trigger language, right? And we paid out to 1% in January last year, because our numbers were high enough to do so. But we also had a 0.17 in this year's compensation package that we knew we had a plan for. And so that was already there. So now in addition to the 0.17, we're just adding to that overall plan and picture of what we have to consider in developing not only compensation packages, but any new programs or any program reduction.
I can talk. I've got a question.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
All right, so first of all, thank you, Troy, for being willing to donate back your 2%. That is really great of you, and I do appreciate that. And so my concerns with this, item number 6 on the slideshow, let me see, where was it? Exactly. So I would like to explain exactly what that means, because I think you guys put that in a spreadsheet for increased class size. Am I correct on that?
Yes, so what this means is that at 7/12, the class size staffing ratio stays the same. Correct. So that the staffing ratios in middle school and high school that we currently have would remain the same. And then they would reduce their SEL position. Versus the line 6, this is an increase of the general education staffing allocation in K6 that would go up by 1, but the K6 schools would keep their SEL.
Yep, I got you on that. Let me read off exactly what that means. So for CCES, which I think is Copper Canyon Elementary School, that means class size would go from 22 to 33. For CVES, that would
But
go
that's just
from,
for one grade, that's for just.
So I guess, Mr. Laney, why don't I summarize it this way, and I can ask Dr. Holmes to fill in. What we recognize is in the elementary, the 12 FTE savings, all right? This is very difficult to predict because there's a lot of time between now and August when the students walk in and we see the whites of their eyes. But when we use our current enrollment, we roll it up and we consider some trends in terms of open enrollment and the school trends for declining enrollment. This suggests, line 6, right now as a snapshot, would suggest there are 12 grade levels across K6 campuses. There are 12 grade levels that with this one increase would lose a section. Is that right, Dr. Holmes?
Yes.
yeah, I gotcha. I failed to mention at Copper Canyon, it mentioned the grade, it's for one grade, so I wasn't saying the whole school.
Yeah. We gave you all of those, but remember, that's really pretty, some of it's dirty data, but we do anticipate that, and that's why we can predict that there would be 12 grade levels.
I would also want to provide a little context around the comment about the increase in class size, that it's going from well below our staffing ratio to the staffing ratio. So there is a good change, but to fairly contextualize it, they're going from well below the staffing ratio to the staffing ratio.
And a lot of times this happens naturally by going,
Yes.
class that's been the same, even if they don't lose any kids, the class that's been the same size since kindergarten, let's say they have the same exact number of kids, as they move up because the staffing ratio changes as they move into higher grades, by the time they can start off with, 4 sections in kindergarten and end up with 3 or 2 sections by the time they hit 6th grade, just because the staffing ratios, and they will be within the staffing ratios every single one of those years. So some of this happens automatically, naturally. You'll
It does.
notice a classroom that last year, you had this many sections and you change that. And I know how that happens with my kids. And so over time, they tend to get larger just within the staffing. So some of this will, the way it's structured out is some of the automatic things that maybe would have happened anyway, and some maybe because of the adding to one student. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think the other thing, I think it's good for people to understand how it might be impacted, but I don't want to create panic because we're naming certain schools. Because again, we don't know what's going to look like next year. It might not even be these schools.
It's projected.
Right. So, but I think you're right, Mr. Lange. I think it's good for us to have a sense of like where numbers can go. So, at one school it is 22, in one grade level 22 to 33. In another grade level, at a different school, it's 21 to 32. And one is 19 to 29. It'll have a significant impact on class size. We don't know exactly where that's going to hit right now, but we can look at what we have and project out. And we're declining enrollment in district, so we're going to have less students next year.
Could I have the numbers? Over 08, 07, when we had to continually increase that class size, it drove me crazy.
because I'm all about elementary, getting kids to read, teaching them, helping them individually. And the bigger those classes get, the less that happens. And so, we have worked at least 8 years to bring class sizes down. That has been a goal of this board, to bring the class sizes down. And this is really painful for me to talk about. So could you give, Dr. Holmes, could you give us the numbers, what our current class size staffing ratios are right now? So just start in K and then go to six?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
I like to say that I have that memorized, but
No,
I
that's
am
okay.
going
Look at your
to
list.
pull it up.
I'll bet Mr. Dawson and I can help you out there, Dr. Holmes.
25, 27,
Wait,
28.
25 for kindergarten.
Yep, 27, 28,
Okay.
29,
Okay.
30, fourth grade?
Fourth grade is what?
30, is it
I thought
31
it was
or
31. 31, then 32,
And then
56.
32 for grade 5 and 6.
31 for fourth and 32
For fifth and
so 5 and 6. Okay. So I gave the example the other day of a class in our district in fourth grade that had 20 across 3 classes, around 20 in each of these classes.
Yes.
And if we were to change it, you would end up with 2 classes in that fourth grade. And that's at a title school that these kids are struggling, trying to recover, and now we're gonna force them into be 2 classes instead of 3. And I really have a hard time with that. I truly have a hard time with that. Because these kids, those fourth graders were in second grade, into first grade from COVID, and their lives have been turned upside down, and they need that help. And to take this and change those ratios, I struggle with it a great deal. Because
Yeah, I think to answer the question I heard you ask earlier, and I wanted to take that out, was, where did we come from? Since the 08, they went way up. And I'll use the example that when I came to HR in 2016, we still had 4th through 6th grade, our staffing ratio was 36 to 1. That was the staffing ratio we were using in 2016-17, 36 to 1. And to get it down to 31 now has been a huge endeavor. But we've made great improvement, I should say, to get back down and do as well or better than we did in 08.
and I remember parents coming and being so irate about how big the classes were. And I agreed with them. And it was just, there is no good way to take care of these things. And so, but I really have a hard time with reducing class sizes K-6. Truly, I do. Increasing class sizes in K-6, excuse me. It totally is bothersome and worrisome to me. And I've spoken to teachers who teach, and they have talked about, it's more important for them personally, and as they look at other things, they would rather have smaller class sizes and not have an FEL. I have spoken to teachers personally about this, and they're concerned. Those aren't the emails I've been getting, but I have spoken to teachers personally, and they reach out to me, and they are so concerned about class sizes going up because they are trying so hard to help these kids recover their educational losses they've gone.
So I wanted to just read a couple of the things on this 70 item list that are M&O considerations. And you'll all see that they're primarily salary and benefits because that is where we spend our money in the M&O budget, between 85 to 87%. Employee pays for their health insurance costs. We could save $34 million if we did that. No one wants that. I mean, that's such an unbelievable cost. Even if the employee pays $100 of their insurance benefits, that only saves $270,000. It's not worth the teacher, in my opinion, the teacher hanging out. But let's look at everything that is above $1 million on this list. Reducing work schedule by 2 days, by 3 days, by 4 days, by 5 days, all employees. And that ranges from 1.7 to 4.3. Reduce non-teacher schedule by 10 days and teacher schedule by 5 days. That's 8.2 million. Reduce all of the parapro hours. That's 3.2 million. Eliminate SEL, we know is 1.8. Eliminate increase class size, we know is 1.9. Increase class size. Now, in this list, it says increase class size by 2. It says 1.7, but that's on top of the 1.9.
That's correct.
Right, so it's way more than that, and so forth. There are smaller things. Reduce the reading specialists. That's about $1 million. That's it. I mean, there's not much on there. And a lot of what's in there is 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. Another big one was to reduce custodial hours by 2 hours instead of 1. I mean, you talk to any teacher in a classroom or any school employee, and they'll say, "We don't have enough custodial staff."
Well, that's already that finalized on here, 2 hours.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, that's a lot. Well, it says here, reduce ABM custodial hours by 2 hours.
That was a different dollar amount at that time because we were looking at that full list.
Oh, okay.
It was simply a calculation
less
on my
now.
part before we could actually speak with ABM to see what it was possible for them to do.
Okay.
And because we would be reducing their employees' work schedules by 2 hours, they said that they could not do that unless they increased their hourly rate. So it ended up being a little bit smaller of a number because in order to increase by 2, they're also increasing our hourly rate.
So we went from 900,000 to 500.
Yeah, 900,000 would have been a straight 2-hour cut from what they stack currently, but they want to increase their rate to be able to manage that.
When you look at this list, there's not a ton of things that aren't related to people. Well, there isn't, almost none of this is unrelated to people. Correct. It's all related to people. So that's just, more people's information. I have another question about carry forward. Now, we're talking about carry forward. What is in the carry forward? What's made up of that dollar amount?
So essentially, it's things that we end up not spending in the year, the bulk of that. So let's specifically talk about M&M because that's super clear, super easy. It's about 7% is about $14 million, and about 9 to 10 million of that is vacancy savings, so positions that we don't fill throughout the year. We don't have that vacancy savings, or at some point the district, and I would presume most employers are in a different situation where it's more of an employer market and they're able to fill up all of your positions. If we're gonna wanna maintain a 7% budget balance carry forward, we're not gonna be able to get that from vacancy savings because we're gonna have a lot of positions filled, and so we're gonna have to kind of automatically pull from the remainder of the budget. Right now, perhaps that is the only positive thing about the way the market is in terms of we're able to just kind of hold on to that vacancy savings to help us into that budget balance carry forward. That's the bulk of it. The rest is just goods and services that we end up not purchasing.
About 2/3 of that carry forward is vacancies, position vacancies that we currently have.
Correct.
Okay. The other question I have, we talked about using about 85% of DAA for M&O, which leaves about 15%. Do you have a ballpark number of what that is? 15%?
Yeah, the 15% I want to say is around a little over $2 million. It's on page 7 of the budget form. That I know. That I have memorized.
So what do we use unrestricted capital for?
So unrestricted cap, first of all, we have a district additional assistance override, that's 6.4 million, $6,410,000 specifically. That district additional assistance override we use all for capital needs. The bulk of that, I don't remember the exact amount, goes towards curriculum purchases, and then the remainder of it goes towards the purchases like white goods vehicles for rest of the unrestricted capital, a lot of it's been held in reserve for a little bit of time. The previous thought was that maybe we might be able to use some of that to support additional needs for a school someday if we needed a new school. And then for some sort of emergency projects, because oftentimes there are projects that we have in our bond package that we said we wanted to complete, but then sometimes new things come up for us that we've been projected 5 years ago when the 2019 bond package was put together. And so we've been starting to use some of those those unrestricted capital dollars to support some of those needs that are coming up that aren't a project slotted for bonds or for the district.
Can you name one?
I think a couple of years, well, it's been more than a couple of years ago, several years ago, the cooling tower at Mountain Trail.
Yes.
Is one that went down at the beginning of the year, and it was a $2 million repair. And that one had not been in the bond package from 2011 maybe or something like that, but that's an example.
Another example, since you said Mount Trail, we just talked about mine right then, Mount Trail, excuse me,
One trail.
Yeah.
Not two trails,
Got it.
just one trail.
Just one trail.
Success.
Thank you. There were some security needs that they had at their campus this year, sort of, it kind of came, to alert that there was a situation that would put our kids in a place where they would be able to get out of if there was an adult that wasn't there with them. And, clearly the situations that happened, at the end of last school year, we wanted to run through that as quickly as possible. There were actually a couple of security needs that we just had. Another one was that elementary school, the one on the right.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're not using that sometimes.
Correct, we're using it.
Did that come out of M&O then? Is that what you were saying? Or it was unrestricted? Unrestricted capital. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we knew that fund, what it was coming out of.
Yeah, we would not be able to pay for an expense like that. That's not an allowable M&O expenditure. So it's a little bit weird because the funding source and the expenditure source used to be the same name for capital, it's just called unrestricted capital. Now the funding source is called district additional business. And with that flexibility, we can put it into the expenditure fund of M&O or the expenditure fund of unrestricted capital. And so 85%-ish goes to M&O, 15% goes to unrestricted capital.
And the reason we don't use more of the DAA is because the residents in our school district have passed bonds. That is the reason that we've been able to
Bond and override.
bond and override, we've been able to use that money to put into M&O.
Correct.
Okay, I took away your time. No, it's fine. I think there's value in having money that we carry forward. I think there's fiscally, that's a responsible thing to do so that we make sure that emergencies can be covered. I wish that it wasn't mostly for vacancies because that would be, yeah. Okay, those were just things I was thinking about.
Mr. Lane, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have one, maybe two more. The staff engagement and climate slide, that's the compensation benefits, and I can't see the other one because my screen's too small. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely, I'm looking across to Dr. Holmes, he probably has it. It's not a presentation that we have available here, but go ahead.
No. Then is that going to be shared at all? Because you talked about it earlier in the presentation. We did a bunch of surveys,
Right.
and this was the place that it was all consolidated in. I just wanted to bring attention to one slide on that. So if you find it with me, it's the third from the bottom or the second one in the compensation benefits and something.
Third from the bottom.
Yeah, third from the bottom, or it's the second one in that, in those four that look the same on my screen. Oh, I found it. It's the working conditions too. So compensation, benefits, and working conditions too. right, so the upper right-hand slide where it talks about class sizes should be raised to create more capacity point for employee raises. This was an employee survey, correct?
Yes. This was a survey that was done before the last meeting. This was a survey, you're talking about the climate survey?
Beginning of November.
November 10th-ish? or
Yeah,
such?
and our target audience was all of our hourly and certified personnel, not administrators.
Gotcha. All right. So I just wanted to know exactly what this is about because that looks like clearly our teachers do not want class size to be raised in lieu of higher pay. At least that's what that data shows me. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It shows 598 strongly disagree, 728 disagree, 415 either agree or disagree, 126 agree, and 75 strongly agree.
Yeah. So they're saying. So the question is asking, should classes size be raised, and they say no. That's what I was saying. That's what I was trying to understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, the majority disagreed or strongly disagreed with that statement.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I forgot my other question. I'll think of it in a minute.
When, looking at the task force recommendation for increasing the average general ed class size by 1 at elementary, that's elementary across the board, whether or not they be title school or is there differentiation between grade level, like if it's a C school versus an A school or anything
Our
like that?
staffing ratios are uniform at elementary K-6. They're uniform by grade level.
And that's the purpose.
Okay,
We have title versus non-title schools who have to do comparability reports to show that we have a maintenance of effort that supports them the same so that the title goes above and beyond.
so right now we have the same staffing ratios at all of our, at title versus non-title schools?
In general.
In general, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I remember my question now.
Okay.
So some of this might just happen by natural attrition, correct? Where people might move away, and when I say people, I mean teachers and staff and so on. That they might just move away, and so then we couldn't replace the position, so we might have to consolidate classes. Am I correct in saying that?
I don't understand the consolidation part, but we have attrition every year. We have retirements, resignation, leave of absences every year.
Meaning that the increasing the average class size could actually just happen by attrition over time.
No, we use these numbers in determining our allocation.
So when
Okay,
when they
gotcha.
were collapsed, like at the beginning of the year, those were collapsed to still maintain and still be within the guidelines of the
Correct,
size
yeah.
test. The staffing ratios were not exceeded by that collapsing.
When we collapsed 12 and a half sections this year, 2 to 3 weeks into the school year, those elementary classrooms were reduced to remain in the current year staffing guidelines.
Okay.
Other questions?
Not a question, really, it's more of an observation. So, no matter what we do at this point, the likelihood that we'd be going into bargaining, in a, I can see that's, I think that's a correct term, is going to happen. Whether it's under a mill or outside of budgetary. And that will affect the 23-24 year. Okay.
Yes.
So the laundry list that Mrs. Bacon was reading from, in essence, is still kind of on the table, isn't it?
Correct.
So,
As I said, this is just the beginning, so there'll have to be continued conversations in order to get there in terms of balancing the remainder portion of the budget, covering expected cost increases in a variety of circles, and providing additional compensation.
And the point I was trying to make is if we make a decision prior to the end of the year, then we are providing direction that these are things that happen. These are now off the table for bargaining. Correct. I mean, I just want everybody to make,
These
understand
things we
that.
did move forward with at your direction, and then provide additional compensation. That's the motivation between making those decisions.
But some of the information, for example, that is coming from these surveys will be taken into bargaining, I presume, to inform pieces moving forward. I appreciate that we did the surveys, I appreciate getting the information, I appreciate that we are looking at a slightly more hybrid model than what we had discussed previously. I know there's always that trying to balance between the universe that is the district and the universe that is the school, and whether some differentiation can be provided. So I'm glad we do that. I kind of feel like part of the situation you're entering into. I don't know how many people remember the film Dave, where Kevin Kline was being asked to impersonate the president. And there's a piece in there where the first lady was homeless and had a program for homeless shelters, and the chief of staff cut out the budget and basically said to the acting president, were they acting? You find that 600,000 or whatever, 600 million, we'll put them back in. And he literally sat down with the cabinet and went through and said, you don't really need that, you don't really need that, you don't really need that, and they came up with the 600 million. And I kind of feel like, is that the situation you're sort of coming into with this list? Or are there other things that may appear on the list?
There are, this is not a comprehensive list in any way, shape, or form. We have just an MNO alone, $240 million budget, so certainly there are other things to consider. But as we've said many times, 85% of that is going to be something that's related to an actual person's position, and those are always hard decisions, made much easier in the
Oh, no, I'm not. I love the movie.
Yes.
Like, I'm not saying,
No, I
it's gonna
didn't
be
think-
that easy.
I didn't think you would.
But, it's just sort of setting the stage. I mean, I appreciate that we have the ability to cover some of this in other ways that isn't necessarily affecting M&O. I remember back when we had legislators, when the recession hit, we had legislators who were threatening to pull any contingency funds, essentially, that any district had. And carry forward. Yeah, the carry forward. We wouldn't have that had they managed to enact that several years ago. And we'd be in a worse situation. So as difficult as this decision is, it's a decision we were gonna have to, it got pushed. I hate to say it, we were facing it one way or the other. So I appreciate, if this was my decision alone, I might change this here, I might do that. That's what task force and consensus is about. So I appreciate that everybody was willing to go back to that table and have these discussions and come up with something that, hopefully provides a little bit more flexibility. So, some real questions now.
I have some comments and some of the letters we've had, teachers have mentioned that how could this happen? How could we have this financial situation? And I've been trying to think of a simplified way to say it. And as we were going through these different numbers and that there was a one-time money that we're going to be giving to the teachers or have given to the teacher, I saw that one time listed somewhere. And I thought, that's what these funds were. They were a one-time thing that were put into the continuing budget. Is that a simplified way of saying that?
We use one-time money to support expenditures that were
ongoing.
and did not cut those expenditures from our budget and actually continued to add them into the budget because at the time there was new money.
We thought, yeah, and so so there was no illegal activity. It was an accounting error done because this district has never dealt with ESSER funds coming into our district the way they were. And it was supposed to be one-time money put into a category, put into an ongoing fund. We spent it, we should have spent it, and now we have to pull back. But this discussion we're having could have happened a year ago. Would have happened a year ago.
Would it be the same result?
And we could have a year ago done it. And so as I think about the SELs, I've read enough letters, I understand at some schools they have been very helpful because kids actually didn't know how to behave coming out of school at home online. They never have been taught to play nice in the sandbox because they weren't playing with kids in the sandbox. So that training from the SELs has helped our children learn some of those skills they were lacking in. I'm speaking to a teacher said, these kids actually don't know how to share and play nice. And this has been helpful. So I get that, but we are in the business of educating, and I think that's what we have to go back to every single time. And I understand you can't educate a child who's hungry, I get all that, or who's just had horrendous problems at home. And I understand that COVID has caused a lot of difficulties, but and society has caused a lot of difficulties. People are making poor choices, and children are often reaping the consequences of those. But so to me, the SEL position was a short, not a long-term. I mean, I know we've talked about doing different things at school in the past, but it was done with one-time money. And I always thought at the time that we have this money now, but it should have been used as we can have them for 2 years or 2.5 years or whatever, but we're not going to have them in the future. So that's my concern. I also want to make a statement. Let me just read it. I feel confident that as ideas have been presented to me, I have been given a full financial explanation and details so that I have been fully informed to provide financial feedback and direction. It's not as if I've been held in the dark. I have been fully informed as we have gone along on this line was this much money, this line is this much money, and how are we going to reach it? I also have been on the board long enough that if we don't save for a rainy day, we fall apart. We have used rainy day funds so many times in this district from unexpected expenditures. You mentioned the cooling tower and Mountain Trail, and anyway, so it's not fiscally responsible to not have funds as a cushion. It's just not what I was elected to make sure happens. So I still do not want to raise the class sizes. I believe there are some schools that do need the SELs. Definitely, I don't feel, but I would rather keep, and also in all our materials, I don't think we have, some of those are funded by different funds at different schools. Is that correct? Some of the SELs are funded through Title I.
Title or ESSER, and I believe it's Title IV.
There's been 3 different funding sources.
Okay.
Depending on the site, they may have M&O, they may have ESSER, they may have.
We
Okay,
have
so
a-
schools,
We have a few through the state, the school safety grant as well.
the what?
The school safety grant that pays for SROs, some schools will also receive counselors for that grant.
Okay.
Are we fairly, I know, where if someone has like a counselor that's coming out of the state funding, do they also have an SEL from M&O? Like, are some places like double or tripled up? And some places just have the one half-time?
They do. The schools that receive most of the schools, I believe, that received the counselor through the state grant came out later. You know, the initial round of the application, we were denied. And then the state added ESSER funding to their grant, and they started filling in positions. So we started getting more positions added to our plate. So we have, I think, 5 schools that received them in that capacity, and that expires at the end of the school year. So the applications will be available again in January. We'll see what schools are. It's a guessing game whether or not we receive the grant again.
Were you asking, do some schools have more than one SEL teacher?
Yeah, so we gave schools, and speaking primarily to the elementary section, I don't remember what we did at the secondary, but we gave them through M&O a 0.5 SEL position. And I think a few of our D schools, I think we maybe gave them a full-time position. And then since that time, schools have used their own ESSER funding to make that a full-time or even more added, they'll go to 1.5 or using the state grant. So many schools have right now more than more than what we allotted them through a variety of different staffing funding opportunities.
I also have a hard time with the gen ed class size. This is the stuff that really don't assembly well. That's a tough one because of the years, and I even have my charts back from over the years of how long it took us to get those numbers down by one. It's just one step, and and you couldn't even do all the grades at once, so it's like in one fell swoop, just changing them. Certain ones would come down a little bit, and then ones, down a little bit more, and you finally got to where we are today, which still, it's taken us that long. And so in one fell swoop, just revert, that's hard, that's tough. I don't have an answer for it, but that's it.
Mr. Laney, do you have any comment regarding the class size?
I think I probably made myself clear on what I think of raising the class size. That I don't think it's the solution. And sorry about my voice. I mean, you should see me. I'm smiling and you don't see all my emotions going through this. You just hear a voice. So.
I have a question on this. It says reduce SEL positions at secondary. So that is 5 high schools and 7 middle.
Correct.
Okay. But in talking to some teachers in elementary, they don't feel like it's necessary at their school. So couldn't we do SELs at maybe the Title I schools and change that or something?
Keep them at Title I schools.
Keep them in Title I and not have them across the board in the elementary. So how many Title I schools are there?
At the elementary level,
Oh, elementary.
Now,
I think it's 13, 14 elementary. Now, most of those already have, to answer the question earlier about do they have multiple positions, all of our title schools, I'm almost 99% sure, all of them have somebody provided to them through the title funding or through another grant opportunity. So maintaining it there would be also then maintaining, it's essentially a double opportunity for them to have that support.
Our schools our Title I schools use their Title I budgets to support the staff that they believe they need the most.
Right,
They-
and that's
they
an
are doing
individual site
Yeah.
decision.
They're already doing that.
I'm fairly certain that we provide them from the district allotment of title. I think we do provide them with the,
As an even distribution.
yeah, as an even distribution, to provide them with a partial social worker that they then usually supplement out of their own to make it a full-time position.
So how much difference would it be if we changed that? What is the dollar difference if we did do SELs at schools that weren't charter schools?
Well, you're looking at, let's say this, it's almost half, right? So if you're only reducing half and eliminating half of the SELs, it would be half of that funding amount.
6 FTE versus 12 maybe as a rough estimate.
I don't know.
No,
That's secondary.
Adding to the 12.
No, adding to the 12, the 6 plus the 12.
You would add to that.
So you'd be at, so
Adding
instead of
another
12, it would be
400-something.
Or-
Another 400,000.
It would be about 1.2 if we only kept SELs at title school.
title elementary school. Because don't middle schools have a counselor and high schools have counselors?
They have,
Yeah, but they're not,
Social, it's not.
they're not.
I know,
high school counselors.
but there's
are
other
mostly
ways to meet
academic
the health.
counselors.
Not
Totally different. I mean, I think that's the point where we're trying to, I mean, that discussion of counselors at secondary is a discussion we've had for a long time. What do they really, what is their role? And obviously, over the, I'm not even gonna say over the years, it's more academic. It really is more of a, we try to supplement that with the college and career centers, but really it seems their role is much more academic and honest.
And that's not to say they aren't doing work.
Right.
They are doing work.
But high school campuses have do they have a social worker? District,
Some
they
do,
have a social worker?
some do,
Not all.
not all. Same
Some
at
of
middle
high
school
school.
too, yeah.
So how much would that change? You said 400,000 approximately?
Just add clarification. If you call up a line number and tell me what you want to do.
Okay, line number 5.
Okay, and what would you suggest there?
To have them maybe, it's sure throwing out ideas, to reduce SEL positions at schools that are not title for elementary.
And then you're also suggesting removing line 6. We're not going to raise class sizes.
Yeah, just one at a time. I think Ms. Berrigan, Dr. Holmes, Dr. Jarvis, if I'm hearing Mrs. Case, that 12 FTE, if it's only left to title schools, that 12 FTE becomes, is that what you're?
No, what I understand is, I can't speak for Mrs. Case, but you're saying go ahead, reduce secondary SELs plus at the elementary level, and only keep it at the elementary title schools. So instead of saving 12 FTEs, whatever half the FTEs are at for SEL at elementary gets added to that.
Right, so is that 18, 20, 21? I
Right.
have no idea.
Yeah, if you would add 6 to it.
Plus 6 would be 18.
Jill, do you agree with that?
I wish I had the list of title schools in front of me. Does anybody in here have
We
that?
just
Yeah, I
went
have.
through it in the other slide. We just went through it on the other.
Any other
So
presentation,
it'd be
right?
like,
Yeah.
Is it there? Can you
it'd
tell
be
me that
18
number?
to 20.
Well, I remember this.
No,
You
you
have it?
The achievement,
use their.
Yeah, and the student achievement factors.
They're not
Oh,
full-time
but that's not all.
Yeah,
positions.
that's true.
They're half-
That's true.
That's not all.
That's why you keep saying half.
It's equals.
It's only 0.5.
Yeah, because a lot of them did the other 0.5 through their own funding.
Correct, but I don't know
Most
how
of them
many
are
title
school.
elementary schools. That's
Some.
the number I need.
A lot of them have
I have it
some,
right here.
You just need to know how many title
it's all
elementary.
over.
Correct, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
Then I'll let you know. Then I'll give you some numbers back. I think Steve's getting it, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The question is.
13?
Yeah.
16.
6.5.
The others. You want the others.
Yeah.
So 33 minus 13 is 20 schools, 29 elementary.
But they're half.
So there's 16 non-title. right?
It's another 816.
Yes.
No,
Correct,
no,
correct.
but
No,
half
They
time.
only are 0.5.
They're only 0.5.
They
By
currently
44.
are 0.5.
544.
They're all 0.5.
544.
At the non-title, they're 0.5.
And they're 0.5 in elementary.
At
That's
the-
more
From
At
M&O.
non-title.
from limited.
So go from 12 FTE to what FTE? Do you know? Sorry.
20.
Another,
You're adding another 10 FTE, or
another
another
8,
8 FTE.
20.
So that doesn't make up the 816.
It's
No.
still $300,000.
And how many of those positions are funded from the ADE?
I
None
just,
of those.
my computer is
Well, none of the ones that we're talking about in this line item.
quite unfortunate.
Okay, but if those were eliminated, as I believe the incoming state superintendent of public instruction has indicated, would those be in title schools that we would then need to fund if we're using this formula?
This formula doesn't touch the head.
Well, no, but what I'm
Safety
saying
is
is if they're in title schools and they're being funded by grants from the state, and those positions, or those grants are eliminated from the ADE.
You know that the school safety grant positions, the housing positions that came out of school safety grant had an expiration date on them, correct?
This June
It's
30th.
June 30th, right? So there's an expiration date on them anyway. There's a new application process that begins after the first of the year for the following year. And those were positions that, schools chose to apply for a counselor instead of an SRO.
So they are not impacted by this, is what you're saying?
Well,
Or they are?
those positions are not impacted by this, but we're also adding, those schools also have the staffing that we have provided them. So it would be impacting the school in some
The
capacity.
school might lose somebody, but it's not coming out of our budget.
Correct.
It's a grant. It's a grant. But they might lose a person.
But hasn't the comments that he would get rid of all SEL?
Well, but I think he's saying that it's the
All the
grant,
funded
the grant.
Grant,
State.
without,
Yeah,
The
that's
state
what I'm
grant.
asking. So we have schools that perhaps have that. I understand, it's a grant writing process and they may or may not.
So currently, as the grant is being released, it is being released. We're working on that. We just got something, so we'll be working on that next day or two. Those grants cover school resource officer, probation officer, social workers, or counselors. So the grant is coming out. It just was released. I'm looking at Chris because we're looking at the email right now. So we'll be getting that out to our schools. But those are the positions that schools can apply for, which will be on top of anything that we're already supplying.
Which is fine, and I know that we only got SROs and then I'm simply saying that the incoming SDI has essentially said that he is eliminating any SEL positions from them. That was in his.
So what was on your list again? Say that again. I know this, I know.
School resource officers, probation officers, social workers, and counselors, which is different than necessarily an SEL person that we're defining. I think that might be causing some of the question. So these positions are actually positions that necessarily says SEL.
Oh, no, I understand that.
Okay.
I think our incoming SDI might need to know that. I understand that.
What's the new number there, the total? You delete line 6 and revise line 5.
4,232,000. So what does that line change to? What does line 5 change to? And it's 12 plus how many?
12 plus 8, so.
And that includes the 0.5.
544, so 1,360,000.
1 million.
And then you deleted line 6.
Oh, no, I didn't delete line 6.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
you have to delete
I didn't
line
understand.
6.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me keep going.
So there's still 270.
3,416,000.
what?
3,416,000.
No, it has to be more than that.
It is. Well, Sean and I got the same number, and that's rare.
Oh,
So-
oh, yes, I get it, never mind, I agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay, what did your number come up to? What was line five then? What did that become?
So you put
Line five becomes
Jill,
What is
that?
1.36.
1.36.
Uh-huh.
And then at the bottom it becomes
3.4.
3,416,000.
And then Jill, what's the difference between this 3,400,000 and
So we're looking at this one.
what does this new number come to?
Sean's gonna do it. I sure wish I had a computer. It's showing the screen. Actually, if you just open an Excel spreadsheet, 1,562,000,
So instead of 1.29, it becomes 1.5,
almost $1.6 million. That's it.
so it's a $300,000 difference.
And you don't have the one which the cabinet suggested in this packet, do you? Okay.
So how many
Oh, is it that 5.1? Is that that? And we're trying to make up how much again? 4?
Mrs. Greenberg had a question that.
So should this new configuration be what is presented? How many, from our M&O budget, how many SELs does that represent?
Which new configuration?
Should we, what
Reduce
what
by
we just
20.
figured,
Should we reduce by
reduce,
20 FTE.
should we only leave the SELs in Title I elementary schools?
Sean is gonna look that up to make sure
Then
we are.
how many will we have? With, including the ones that are funded by,
No,
No.
no
That's-
ADE
because
ones. How many are coming out
I'm
of
quite
our
honestly
M&O?
assuming those are gone after this year.
So how many M&O, SEL specialists will be, FTEs will be in our district?
6.5.
6.5.
6.5.
6.5.
I'm sorry, I was looking at this. Tell me your answer again. What was your answer?
6.5
6.5,
SELs remain in our budget. FTEs,
6.5.
that's what that calculation was out to.
I don't know if this helps the conversation, but maybe if I can just help you a little bit with the tenor of the Budget Task Force Committee. There was a strong feeling that we need to keep SELs at elementary. And there was, I'm gonna say, a relatively equally strong feeling that we need to not touch class size at secondary.
Why would
That's how we got to this mixed recommendation, if you will.
So I'm sorry, can you explain the difference between increasing increasing class size by 1 at elementary versus what that looks like increasing class size by 1 at secondary? Why that was such a distinguished, like why was that such a big?
Because when you raise class size at secondary, it affects every school. And as a percentage, it's a little heavier. So, for example, all of the high schools will lose 2.1 to 2.9.
Staff members.
Yes,
Full-time
full-time
which
equivalent.
means, say it, if it's 3.0, that's 15 sections at a high school, that they would eliminate from the master schedule.
Can I ask Mr. Dennis, how does that affect, if that is a change? Tell us how that affects our high school.
Essentially, if you took 2.5 from my school, because our teachers teach 6 sections. So 3.0 would be 18 sections of classes. If you took our master schedule and eliminated 18 sections, and then redistributed all of those kids into all the other teacher classes, that would be the effect of it. And then those equivalent of 3 classroom teachers would be. The difference between secondary and elementary is at the secondary level, it's a ratio, 1 to 28 or 1 to 29, right? So you take your maximum number of students you have and you divide it by 28 currently. If you raise it to 29, you get less teachers. At the elementary school, it's a class size maximum. It's really not an average class size, it's really you're raising the class size maximum. So that class will never be bigger than that. So it really depends on how many kids are at each grade level, whether you get 2 sections of second grade or 3 sections of second grade. So that's why in some schools, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Collins, but of the 29 elementary schools, increasing max class size affected only 9 of the schools. So
12 grade. It affects 12 grade levels.
9 schools and
across
only
the
12
district.
grade levels, but the other 21 schools, at elementary schools, there would be no change. So it automatically affects immediately all 12 secondary schools and not disproportionate.
And from a staffing standpoint for the secondary, that's not eliminating one math teacher. Like at the elementary, I'm eliminating a 4th grade teacher. I'm eliminating 2 sections of algebra. So now I'm not hiring full-time teachers. I have a bunch of piecemeal positions. So from a staffing standpoint, it creates a hiccup for them in terms of how they fill those positions.
And just as an example, when my son was a senior, he was trying to take calculus, and it was only offered one time. It was during student government, and he was student government president, and it didn't work. And so, because it was only offered one time, so it causes all kinds of hiccups in scheduling. That's just a small example, but it's a personal example, I know. But it causes all kinds of kids trying to schedule things. It doesn't work to get honors classes, AP classes, and it's a huge headache.
So just to provide maybe a little bit more clarification on that, at the elementary level, there's, if I did this correctly, there would be 203 grade levels across the district. Like Fireside grade 3, that's a grade level. There's maybe 3 teachers there. Hidden Hills, 5th grade, that's a grade level, 2 teachers. So just grade levels at schools. 12 will be affected. So that would mean 191 would not be affected, which is very different than secondary, where every school is going to have to rebalance, and it will impact class sizes in, I would say, most sections. Not all sections, but the majority of sections. So the impact in elementary versus secondary is very different.
I mean, this year.
Yeah,
It could be,
right,
it could be different
the next
5 years from now.
Yeah, it changes.
Because raising class size is raising class size permanently, not just for next year.
Right, but it's.
Well, that's not true, right?
It is.
You can go back, we get tons of money from the state, we'll go back.
When you change class size though, whatever the year is, whatever the circumstances, whatever the ratios are, higher or lower, that theoretically what I just explained is gonna be true.
It's gonna be a much smaller percentage at the elementary level.
It's going to not impact many more.
Right.
But if the parents get mad enough and leave our district, they'll never get to the high school. Just saying.
Thank you for the clarification. So, but as an opposite to that, it's not as though the budget task force representative, all the parents, all the staff happen to be secondary, and that's why they were focused on secondary. It was because of this large complication, not because of the people who were on the task force thinking from their own experience.
It's true, I just felt a little bit of an obligation to express what I know
No,
I
that's great. That was
heard
very helpful,
in that committee.
very helpful.
So if we, go back to the screen that was presented, so should we raise class sizes at the elementary level? We would retain the SEL at those schools, to provide support, should the class sizes actually increase, which obviously we know they likely will, even if they don't hit the maxes, they're gonna likely increase, to some extent. But the teachers will have more continued support.
They will all have that continued support.
So with 12 sections being affected at the elementary level, every elementary school retains the SEL that in this scenario. And it leaves the class size in place of secondary, but removes the SEL.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing the instructional coach on this last one. Am I missing it?
You know, that is one of the topics that we've discussed, but no consensus on, so there's not a recommendation.
Are you just
So-
looking for the chart that it was on before?
Well, yeah, it's way back here, but it's not on the one that came.
Right, it's not, that was removed from consideration by the Monday.
Right, yeah. But so what are we doing about instructional coaches?
There was no consensus on any change in instructional coaches.
So-
We're keeping it.
There was no consensus on how it should happen.
Correct.
There was agreement that it could happen, we just can't agree how it could happen.
I don't even know that I would say that. There were some, I think, in my recollection, that weren't even probably comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, we just, the committee just did not get to a place where they could identify what that would look like for for instructional coaches.
So on this one chart, the final cabinet recommendation takes away instructional coach rates. And that's how you get to the 5.1 million.
Correct.
But this one doesn't even touch it.
Correct.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up, I was just waiting to, that is something that I would like added back onto this. We may not know how to do it, so I have a question about that. How many instructional coaches do we have in the district? And where are they located?
But remember, we're just talking about M and O instructional coaches,
Right.
That's fine, yes.
right? So,
Oh, yeah,
because some of them are paid through ESSER.
On the instructional coaches, they're paid for through, the results-based funding.
Okay, which goes into our M&O.
Which we can then, if we eliminate them out of results-based funding, we can find other M&O things to put in that meets the requirements of results-based funding.
And that's 24.3.
24.3.
24.3.
so I was just referring to the ones that would be affected.
It
by
says
this.
23 on
Are they
this, but it's 24.3.
23, I think might have been SEL.
No, it's
Instructional coaches on here, it says FTE.
So, looking at the same list of the ones the committees discussed but couldn't come to consensus, if by this math right here, leave class size impact reduce elementary school by 0.5 FTE support, which would be either TOA, SEL, or instructional coach. So it seems like every school allocated right now a 0.5. Is that the average? Is that how
That elementary.
at elementary? Okay.
Is it 0.5 in elementary?
I'm sorry, what was the
For
question?
instructional coaches?
Yes,
It is half.
yes.
Half-time for
There's a
instructional.
couple
So
that
they
have,
do two
there's a
schools.
couple that have one, there are a few that have one.
But is that funded out of different funding or is that just?
Is that them supplementing their own? It was the same setup with SEL. We provided them with a 0.5. There were a few schools, I think are D schools, that we provided some additional support to on our own. And then many of the schools have used ESSER funding or other grant opportunities, but primarily ESSER to make that a full-time position.
So we did at 0.5 and they made it a whole by other funding.
Correct.
But the ESSER funding, let me get this right, it goes away at the end of this year completely.
Not all ESSER funding, technically the ESSER fund ends September of 2024, so it'll be next fiscal year that it ends. I think we were talking about some other things specifically that we're planning to end this year. And one of those things is the state also received their version of ESSER funds, it's not called ESSER, but we'll call it their version of ESSER funds, and that's what was funding some of these additional SELs that were provided, and that's what
June 30th. So the funding from the state is going away for,
So just as a reminder, the ESSER funds came in 3 buckets, and they came with 3 different years of expiration. So the last bucket is the bucket that expires in September of
2024. So there could, the ESSER funds were used for many, many things. We bought material, we bought reading material. I mean, we used it, many things it was spent on.
Mm-hmm.
So are there commitments for all of those last bucket of ESSER funds already? It's already committed, isn't it? Okay. Just check.
So was there a discussion on this, going back to the discussion did not come to consensus? Item number 4, which was leave the class size intact, but reduce, this is where I got the 0.5, because it was point FTE. Does every elementary school have a 0.5 TOA and a 0.5 SEL and a 0.5 instructional coach? Is that the model right now?
It's not allocated exactly like that, but it was, I believe that level of FTE does exist.
We have 4,
There's 1.5 of something.
we have 4 elementary schools that do not have a TOA allotment assigned to them.
Okay. Do they have then a higher SEL or higher, or they only have a 1.0? They only have 1.0, not a 1.5?
They have what we allotted to them and then whatever they've done to supplement that. So we did not allot them extra because they don't have a TOA.
Okay.
And if we can ask, just jump in, their consensus was reached. Were we getting that discussion? I mean, how did that discussion?
No, that one really wasn't advancing. I mean, it came up at least twice.
So basically that means it's on us to make a decision in regards to that. I'm fine with it if we want to talk about that.
Well, I think that if you make the revisions to line 5, like you suggested, there's 20 positions there. When you delete line 6, you're at 3.4. It's added $300,000, to that starting point for the spring bargaining. Instead of 1.3, it's now 1.6. It's just a heavier lift in the spring, but you can do that.
I'm not really interested in that,
I'm not,
Yeah.
in reducing the SELs.
The reason why I was asking earlier, the breakdown of where the instructional coaches are was because I wanted to see and have a discussion at how we can make a decision on that as a board. So that's why I was asking where they are, the ones that would be affected by this.
There's 23 of them, so.
That was in the link.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a link that shows you the sites and the allocations.
or the instruction.
Yeah, what I don't have are vacancies. There's about 2,
Okay, I'm listening.
it's about 2.0 vacancies.
And there's about 2.0 vacancies that aren't listed there. They just didn't pull them again.
So there's 2.0 vacancies in instructional.
In addition to the list of instructional coaches by site.
when we pulled this list originally, we were trying to determine the impact on people, and vacancies aren't an impact on people. So,
So just glancing at these, most of them are at the elementary level and a few at the middle school. Am I seeing that correctly?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, it's 6.5.
And that's really a function of, we have a lot of elementary schools versus middle schools. So the middle schools each have, it looks like they each have a 1.0, and the elementaries all have a 0.5, with a couple of exceptions.
But none at the high schools.
Not out of results-based funding.
Aren't there some at the high schools that are paid out of different funding?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
We have one at the high school. Paid out of ESSER. Yes. I'm sorry, we have another two that are paid out of Title I at North King. Yes, sorry.
All of these involve people. All of the decisions are so hard. I mean,
For the most part, that's the biggest chunk of it. There are, furlough days in there for all employees, there are, reductions in custodial hours.
but the main things are there. May I ask a question on why the cabinet put those into this? Is it part of last in, first out?
They were some of the most recent hires, in terms of program offering at the present time. As you can observe, these are very, very difficult decisions, and we want to look at, impacts as far as cost as possible. However, these people, whether instructional coaches or SEL people, have a very positive impact on our children, our students, our teachers, our support staff. They are very valuable. In my position, they do support our strategic plan, but I feel strongly that all of our positions are valuable. All of our people are a part of the team to support our kids and our teachers and our support staff in their endeavor for success and excellence. It's not easy, as the silence rounds over this room, because we have different ideas about, class size, we have different ideas about SEL. There is no one right answer. The only answer that would be, a positive resolution for all of us if there was a lot more revenue. I'm not sensing that there's, any consensus on SELs or any consensus on class size.
Well, as far as the class size goes, and we did make a promise in regards to our voters this year. So, as far as the instructional coaches go, I'm just trying to brainstorm on ideas here. Is there a way to know which schools need the most help with instructional coaches versus which schools have teachers that just naturally help out and help other teachers? Is there a way to know that? Do we need to ask the principals that or dive into the details?
You know,
Because it's not like, we don't need to eliminate all of these. We're only looking at, I'm spitballing here, maybe 5 to 8.
that's a really tough question. I think everyone, would likely advocate for the positions, that they have.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the
Yep.
other,
I get that.
I think the other thing is, we heard from Jean Coben earlier, that the coaches play an integral part of looking at this data and helping teachers improve their instruction. So,
Yes, they do. I totally, yeah, you're absolutely right on that. I understand.
I mean, just doing all that data is a heavy lift for a regular classroom teacher. Just looking at it, disaggregating it.
Trying to keep their head above water.
Yeah, and they don't have time for that. either.
To have somebody go through it with them and explain and help.
The other thing that I'll share with you is I do get a little bit of heartburn when we talk about funding or staffing our schools differently, not in a non-uniform manner. I'm thinking about comparability in particular. It causes problems with our ability to comply with state standards around how we need to staff.
So explain what you mean.
Yeah, I don't understand what you mean. Actually, comparability is for title, it's actually a federal standard. And if you're not comparable in terms of, the purpose behind title funding is to supplement and not supplant at schools that are in high free response areas, for example. So their expectation is that per pupil, generally, there's other ways to do it, but generally per pupil, that you staff comparably from school to school using your state funds, your general funds, right, our MMO funds, other states call it other things. And that we use title funds to supplement those things and not supplant them.
Not to add to.
Supplement.
To add to, not to replace.
Not to replace.
And. we-
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so there's the supplement supplant piece that we always have to be careful for, and then there's a comparability piece, and there's tests for both of those that keep Dr. Holmes and I up for a couple of nights in the late summer, early fall, and so we make sure we're good to go with those. For example, we just submitted our comparability back at November, and that's okay for now. So every year we have to do that. So when you're saying that, what about?
So what I'm,
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is, I think it's okay for us to do that if we're differentiating between secondary and elementary. Like we can make that work, and the recommendation that you have been presented with today does that. You have SELs at secondary, but not at elementary. Another example of,
Other way around.
Reverse
Okay.
it.
how did I say that? Yeah, reverse.
Yes.
We have SEL, right, thank you. Thank you, I'm gonna move on. Another example of how like we allocate but provide choice is we talked about the SELs. So we allocated a 0.5 across the district. We've given them choice for that to be an SEL counselor, an SEL social worker, or an SEL specialist, but we have an even allocation across the district on that. If we get into a discussion around, let's give some of the schools instructional coaches and others not, that's where it gets complicated. That's a different thing. Now we're,
This is one of those things that has standards about equal allocation, and you differentiate other ways that there's baseline strategies that we have to consider in initial staff.
we got it right when we gave schools choice by saying you all get a 0.5, pick what you want it to be. But when we say U16 get a 0.5, U13 don't, that becomes problematic. And I raise it because I thought I heard we might be thinking down that road. So
We were doing that.
Yes.
If we remove the SELs from non-title schools, we're there.
Okay,
That's precisely what we're doing,
okay,
right? Yes?
that's what I thought I heard, so that's why I'm jumping in.
Not SEL, you're talking instructional coaching.
Well,
No.
just by adding those 8 to that line 5 that you suggested, taking
Yeah.
away the SELs and
That's what
non-title schools,
I see
we're
that
in
as
a, we're in a
problem.
we're in a
Comparability
comparability.
problem.
I just want to make a comment about the instructional coaches, because we saw in our data how much they're doing to bring the data and changing instruction for among the teachers and the grade levels and impacting that. And I think it's a difficult position on the books because people don't see that as impacting their child's education, because they don't see that teacher in the classroom working with their kids. Like they see their kids might come home with a lesson that they've done with SEL or come up with some sort of talking point or a new original thing that they may have heard with the SEL teacher that day. But they're not going to come home with a story about the instructional coach that helped their teacher go through the data and help target them to do that extra math lesson today that will really help them all understand the how the math is progressing and make sure that they understand math, and we'll do, the whole class is ready to move on to the next math lesson. Like the kids don't see that, parents don't see it. They don't realize what an impact that instructional coach is having on their kids and their classrooms, because that person, they might see that person in the hallway, but they don't really know what that person does. And so in their mind, it might not be a person that's close in proximity to the classroom, and yet what they're doing with this data and being able to impact the direction that teachers are going with their teaching is definitely a direct impact on the kids.
Well, if you look at that suspension information we got earlier today, bullying and harassment, we're up almost 3% in suspensions for that, which means it's serious. It's not just little bits of bullying. It's significant, right? An incident is significant.
From the letters we received, they talked about instructional coaches, how much they helped new teachers learn how to be better teachers and how to use the resources. And so there were a lot of,
If you think back to, in 08, after 08, when we took deep cuts, we stripped our professional development curriculum offices. Left down to almost nothing. And I think it had a huge impact on, our support to the teachers and curriculum training that we've been able to put in because of that. We've got to build that back. And that's why those support positions are not on the list to have the next conversation for what reason. Fall into that bucket with their administration, because they're at the district office, but they're not, we have extra teachers, the support teachers. All of those folks are out in the classroom helping people succeed, but people don't see them either. As well. Maybe have that conversation.
so I have a comment. So I don't know what page it is, the one that matches that I've written on it. So if we do that, it goes to 3416. Is that correct? In 416, I said there were 2 million.
I think we're cautioning you to not change line 5 as you suggested, because of.
It's gonna cause a staffing problem. It's gonna cost a,
Comparability issue.
With the state and federal.
yeah, it's the state office that I said state, it is the federal dollars.
So- They have to all go or not go, basically.
At,
We can
I
only
mean,
three
different
or
levels, you
second,
can do
yes.
high, middle, but you can't
that would be
take
my,
away part, is that correct? And that goes for instructional coaches and for SEL.
I would say it goes for just about anything. moment of
Here's
silence.
crickets.
So I guess just to offer maybe an observation, some reflections. Line 5, I'm not gonna read as is. And line 6 is the sticking point right now, in terms of what replaces it. I think line 6, I sense, is, there's consensus here to not do line 6. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you replace line 6 with. It, like,
Okay.
right, like I,
At least for a couple of years, I
Yep.
think that's right, right?
I mean, the thing that I'm thinking about with line 6 is, we have, I did the math, I don't know where I wrote it down. We have 203 grade levels in the district. Elementary, K6. K6. And this would affect 12 of them, which is 6%.
Right.
So that's what I'm thinking about. It's not 50%. Look, I'm the one who brought up we can't do it because of the M&O override. I'm the one who, absolutely not. But I don't know I don't see another option that makes sense either.
Well, I would offer an option, in terms of support professionals, but we can't hire them either. Those positions remain vacant, right? Over years and years, if we were to add a classroom in January, we frequently did not split a section and add a teacher. We would add, support professionals, to the existing classrooms, lower the PTR and such like that. So if that was a strategy to address these 12 that are not much higher, that could be consideration, but it's creating a vacancy that may or may not be filled.
You're saying if line 6 remains the same, perhaps adding not a reduction, but an addition of, a 0.5 instructional assistant.
We would probably make that decision, I would think, though, once we knew where the actual numbers landed.
Right, but I mean, if it's 12, 12 times, $25,000 is the cost for 12 for the 12 grades.
Sure, okay.
Assuming that you hire somebody and they're there all year, right?
Yeah,
But
sure.
again, if vacancy on the books. Yeah, right.
You can, just set your expectation about gen ed class size and, the dollar amount, to spring.
But then they'd be going in with $3 million deficit.
No,
200
About two.
About two?
wait,
Well,
just over.
2.1?
Someone add that up. 1.29 plus the 8 one.
2.2.
We have to hear by March, about the aggregate.
Yeah, the aggregate expenditure limit is a whole
That's
different conversation.
Big other problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't mix, that's apples and oranges, so I wouldn't mix that into this conversation.
We won't even be able to open school. I mean, we're closed. I don't know how to do that.
So,
So you're saying the recommendation is to accept the semester, do not, accept 6, we just increase
Yeah. So that would go into bargaining with a deficit of $2,106,000.
On top of whatever.
on top of the
Well,
other
whatever,
part,
right,
you're right.
the cloudy.
That, we don't, there's still a lot of unknowns, right? I'm more optimistic than Jill is, I'll just, we go around and around about that,
And this may still come out of our, correct?
the class size?
Possibly, I mean, we typically on class size, spend time in the fall in a class size task force with parent involvement and, recommendations, informing the board of those type of things, and then, take it to budgeting for finishing touches. So, there's always getting parent input and, on the class size conversation too.
And this really hasn't had parent input on this.
It has now, and we added a parent to the process.
We
this
added a
past
parent,
Monday.
but not through the whole process.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, class size has always been kind of its own separate entity, and we,
Well, our focus, certainly over the last 8 years has been on trying to reduce it, right? So we've been strategic about that.
we've applauded it, that finally we got there.
Well, but we also applauded adding SEL positions. We've also applauded adding instructional coaches. I mean, exactly, and as, we have a strategic plan, I think, the question too is always, none of this is gonna help, but, what moves, what's perfectly playing best, I guess. None of us wanna do any of this. If we need to sock our out, we can't do that. None of us want to do it. But I agree with Julie. I mean, I'm absolutely not in favor of reducing class size, but I think in terms of,
Increases.
I'm just increasing what I said.
You said decrease.
Oh, no, I would love
To
to
be
decrease
clear,
class
you
size.
think decrease.
I'm sorry, yes. But the fact that it touches 6% of our total number of classrooms is an easier, it's unfortunate, but it's an easier piece to look at than positions that affect every classroom.
I don't know, I still remember the very upset parent.
Yeah, but that was when everybody was seeing a huge increase in class size. I mean, there are gonna be parents upset, for sure, 100%. So there's this number 3 that's in here, additional furlough days for COA and cabinet. I mean, what does that look like in terms of costs, what is savings?
If you go back to your list, well, no.
It's
your
not,
list
it's
is-
not, it was
yeah.
sort of a new idea that somebody had brought up. We haven't talked about it.
It's a little bit more about,
Can we get a number for that, just so we know what it is? I mean, you don't have to do it right now.
Oh, okay.
But I mean,
Well, I'd like to look.
okay. The, I mean, seriously,
About 30 or so.
It's gonna be a lot of money.
it would be symbolic. It would not be material.
It'd be about 20,000 per day.
For all of this?
Per day.
For 1 day. Not gonna have a big impact. That's number 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's number 3 is
Yeah.
20,000 a day.
So, 0 progress.
That's what we did.
So going back to the list of 73-ish items, you know, obviously several of them were considered untenable, I guess would be the word, I don't know, whatever. There were some, it looks like, that were maybe possibilities. Did the task force on Monday go back to this list at all? To look at any of this again?
There was a little bit of looking at the full list, and that's why some of the other things that were talked about most frequently ended up on that page, on this
The
page.
non-consensus.
The non-consensus page. I mean, even beyond this non-consensus page, there were a number of things that were discussed. But these were the things that the group had consensus on to share that we didn't have consensus on.
Because I'm looking, and
Think
I'm
about
just
that.
picking this one out because it's not a large number, but it's, you know, an interesting number, good number, you know. Library, 2 library meeting types at the secondary level.
That did not come up in our last.
That didn't come up.
Not at the last one. And there was discussion related to that, maybe just for the information for the board, that at some high schools, those librarians are teaching sections. And so that would affect sections.
And
Was it looked at again with, the permanent subs? Like, how does that net out? I know I've seen that a couple of places, and it was 0, but is it really 0? Or how is that, like, are they fully utilized every day, permanent subs? Especially at elementary, I'm assuming at high school there are more.
I think almost all, if not all, of our current permanent subs are ESSER, and I believe they're going away at the end of this year.
Oh.
Anyway.
Okay, that's what, thank you.
I think you said there.
The permanent subs are not funded out of M&O anyway, they're funded out of ESSER. So when ESSER is gone, those are already
Okay.
not,
I don't, read the whole line. What is that, please? Not even.
Permanent building sub.
0.
Yes, okay, good. No, we're good, yes.
Yeah, that is
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Zero.
thank you. Okay. So
And I
already-
think also that was 0 because we had, when you consider that means that somebody has to pick up those sections. So if nothing else, it's these teachers to pick
Right,
up
the
those
emergency
sections.
rate.
And
It's not gonna be the same.
there's no savings.
They didn't touch, it says reduce high school assistant principals from 2 to 1, and, I mean, did they talk about those things?
Not at the last meeting, I believe, I remember one meeting where it was discussed for a little bit. Mentioned,
Not do it. Right. Well, I mean, one of the, from what I understand, one assistant high school principal, it takes one just to do the schedule for 3 months. It's so complicated from what I understand. I mean,
It is a
high school
significant-
schedule is very difficult, is that right? To the point of brain fry?
I actually did that myself, in a former position, and it takes up quite a bit of
Like
the
months.
second half of the year.
Months, yeah, that's what I thought.
So, when bargaining starts, pretty much everything's on the table again, like all of the, there's a brainstorming set, like how that goes on. I mean, is it similar to the budget task force?
I wanna just make a point of clarification here, because I think we're still, neither Dr. Bales nor I were here when, not in current positions or positions that have dealt with the budget cuts. And so we're still doing some investigation into whether that's done literally within the bargaining process or sort of alongside of the bargaining process. And so when we say going into bargaining, it's sort of like letting us know that for bargaining, we don't have money to work with necessarily.
Okay.
Yes.
The cuts aren't gonna come out of the bargaining agreements.
No.
The bargaining groups know we're still with a deficit in the budget.
Correct, and all of those organizations, even if it is not part of the bargaining process, and I'm not saying I know that to be true or not, we have to investigate that. We're chatting with our friends in the past to find out about that. They still have representation in whatever group, just like they do with the budget task force.
But from what I can remember, when we had to make cuts, there was a school board taking the arrow. I mean,
Because ultimately our decision.
well, yeah, but we went through those to the point of misery personified. And I mean, it was terrible. It was just terrible. But there wasn't a group effort in it. We got all the dollar amounts and we went through them. It was terrible. It was just terrible. Nobody wanted to be responsible for that.
You haven't given me that much to work with here.
There we have it. Take the task force recommendation. Deficit that needs to continue to be resolved.
What does that look like? If that's the result, what does that, like, what does that look like?
It means the 2 point, what is the number now?
2.2-ish million on top of
2106.
7106, and that's kind of the starting point in relation to all the other projected increases that within the case. We plan for, 500 students here next year, which is another, $3 to $4 million, so we're starting with several $1 million, that we will have to work together to come up with a plan for. And once we start to see what the legislative session looks like, what's the conversation down there, right now, we would predict the 2%, cap increase for revenues. That 2% is equal to,
it's like on next year.
a couple $1 million, that's not a lot, so, there's the pluses and minuses, as we go through this, and there are more minuses that we have to start with this year than we had in years past. We're going to see increases with budgeting for 5% increases on goods and services.
I think it's 7.8 right now.
7.8% increase on goods and services.
And last year, did they give us more inflation?
They didn't call it inflation, but they gave us more towards the base. So they still gave us 2% inflation, so it was within the conditions passed related to that, and then they just gave us additional money for this one, that they didn't call it inflation.
Which could happen again.
Conceivably. Sorry.
Okay. Maybe possible.
At the teachers, the survey didn't really just say, you want this or you want this. So if the elementary teachers were to vote, did we listen to that with the SEL versus increasing class size?
Well,
Just
it did
that.
both.
I think this, I think that this budget task force recommendation reflects the voices that they collect.
We reviewed that.
We did share
We
all of
reviewed
that.
that data.
Is that fair enough back there? Heads or not?
Well, can I end with something positive?
Sure, good.
Good luck.
Thank you to everybody. I mean, it's a lot of work and I appreciate everything that goes into it. I'm sorry that there's not some magic wand. But you gave us the data that we asked for in the board meeting, and I really appreciate you being willing to bring that to us, to give us some more information to make decisions around. And I appreciate the willingness to have a lot of conversation about this, because I think that is the key to understanding it for many people. So thank you for that.
Difficult as it is, I'm sensing a recommendation that builds off of this class-like task force recommendation. I plan to present this presentation that we went through the first half hour tonight, as a discussion item, the budget task force update. And I would hope, as I give you the presentation, that commentary and answer some questions that I think people want to hear and such. It'll be a very similar presentation, but I would hope that we can provide some commentary about the things that you've studied and discussed, and so maybe reiterate what you hope to see in the recommendation.
All right, so, may I please have a motion to adjourn?
I vote.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. The meeting is adjourned.
How loud you are.